then.
Can I just say, Prime? You look super nice tonight with the grooming and stuff. I think you're pretty on point.
With the grooming. Okay.
You know, haircut looks like he got a haircut. Looks like he shaved a little bit. It looks good.
Okay. Yeah, as opposed to when I look like a slob. Is that what you're trying to say?
What is this shit? What is this shit? I'm trying to compliment you.
No,
and you're sitting there like,
you're
oh
normally saying, Wick, that I look like a fucking slob. That's what you're saying.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I didn't expect that treatment. Wow. Here I learned my lesson tonight. Okay, no more compliments.
No, thank you. I do appreciate the kindness. Hey, everyone, if you could turn on your cameras if you're here, right? Turn your cameras out. All right. Oh, there we go. We got some cameras here. Oh, look at the beautiful people, right? I just told them they're beautiful. They're really not. But yeah, look at the beautiful people here. Okay. So let's put them on screen and put myself up. Is that oh god damn it, Doobie. Fuck. Okay. I really do hate the close-ups. Not a fan.
Doobie has a face only a mother could love.
A face fit for radio,
she really loves
and a voice fit for print. So
real quick, I was talking to some asshole in his chat room, so I need to pee. I will be right back.
Okay.
You're talking to an asshole and now you need to pee? What the fuck?
Yeah, the asshole was holding him up. He was waiting too long.
Okay.
The conversation was too ridiculous and absurd. He had to stay in.
Hey Prime, have you been playing Elden Ring, bro?
Yeah, I was saying, yeah, I have Elden Ring, but I'm not very far in. I'm only like 8 hours in.
Only 8 hours? Okay.
I'm busy making content here, like I was saying. This is what I do. I would love to be doing that right now.
I get it.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
But I really
open challenge to literally everybody in chat, everybody on the panel. If you have Elden Ring on PC, I will fight you. Okay, I will fucking destroy you. And if you lose, you need to be my slave. Through a contract.
Right.
It's not actually slavery, but you know.
Indentured
I don't know how the
servitude,
game
right?
works yet, but challenge accepted.
I don't know how the game works yet, but I'm going to.
I don't know how. I don't know anything that Doobie just said
about,
but I know that we can somehow fight.
I have beaten a few of the bosses, so.
I hit. Rage.
I'm in deep.
I just hit in game, by the way. So I'm like.
Oh wow.
I'm like 160 right now. Yeah, I just hit.
Cringe Lord.
I'm like 70. I'm like 70 fucking T, bro. Come on.
Oh my god, you guys are 72. I'm 69 right now. I won't even lie to you.
Oh my god, the little digital dick measuring contest happening right now. Doobie,
okay, nerds, we're trying to talk about important things.
Yeah, like slavery. Let's do it.
Yeah, like slavery. Exactly. Doobie, you want to say something?
So I'm actually really curious as to so Prime, do you have a preferred topic? Because I'm curious about both of them. If these people can tell me why bonded labor shouldn't be allowed, or why people on death row shouldn't be able to opt for. I'm sorry, people with life sentences shouldn't be able to opt for death row.
I prefer whatever you guys prefer. So what do you guys want to talk about?
I would prefer to talk about the second topic that Doobie just listed, personally.
Sure.
Which one was that? I'm sorry.
The suicide.
Or the
opt-in execution for life sentence people.
So so I guess my position would be, I don't know how much you saw of me arguing on the panel, was it last night? Or whenever it was for assisted suicide in general. But it seems to me like a lot of the same arguments apply to prison, in that, to sort of put it loosely, generally speaking, if we can get people, generally speaking, most people who are suicidal can get to a place where they're not suicidal. When we can get people to a place where they're not suicidal, they're happy they are. If they try to kill themselves and survived, they're happy they survived. Suicidality seems to be a thing that almost always happens to us in a sort of heat of the moment thing, as a temporary thing, and that we almost unanimously would rather be prevented from doing it whenever we see how people later feel about it. And so in that vein, I don't see why that doesn't extend to prison. And I do think that there's a big problem with this sort of mental health trap that we're just forcing people into. But the thing is that I would say that there's probably a lot better solutions. And while I hate it when people use that against me, because I always say, well, why not both? But in this case, it seems to me like, because of everything else I just listed, I can't imagine a way to assist people, to enable assisted suicide in prisons that isn't necessarily going to cause the harm of basically enabling a whole bunch of people to kill themselves that just didn't have to and would have rather not in the long run if they were given the opportunity to survive.
One of the important things we need to talk about when it comes to the legal system is that the legal system has mechanisms in place that say that allow for them to make mistakes and then correct their mistakes. The appeals process is one of them. And when we allow this choice to be made by people who have been convicted and sentenced to life in prison, it can feel hopeless. It can feel that they have no way out because, again, this is a lot to go through. I can only imagine. I've never been sentenced to life in prison, but I can only imagine the amount of pressure that is put upon you in a situation like that. So even if you know you're innocent and the court has made a mistake, which they have on multiple occasions, having this as an out when you feel that hopeless is going to create a bad kind of a bad incentive there. And so I do not think that it is going to lead to good outcomes. And that is why I would be opposed to having an option for people who've been sentenced that way. Because a lot of them will take it whether or not they're innocent in the end or not. Because a lot of people have been, well, I won't say a lot, but there's been several cases where people have been put into even death row, but have been.
But there are lots of cases where there is no hope because they did do the thing. They've admitted they did the thing, right? And there's zero possibility that they're getting out of prison. Right. So in these cases, which I think is the vast majority of cases, the vast majority of people in prison are not innocent. Right. They've done the thing. Right? Either they admitted it or they didn't. But we know they did the thing. We're pretty sure in that. And a lot of times I gave examples during the panel, like Samuel Little, the Grim Sleeper dude, fucking Charles Ng, right? Who there's zero fucking chance they didn't do these things. The Golden State Killer, zero chance they didn't do it. They've admitted they did it. It was them, right? And there is no hope that they're getting out. So given that there is no hope that they're getting out, right? Because they've like murdered dozens of people, why shouldn't we allow them the option of instead killing themselves?
Because the option, it might be okay in their case, but it wouldn't be in the case of someone who hasn't admitted it and who later gets exonerated. And there's no way to distinguish beforehand the difference between someone who will later, like we don't know for 100% sure, like whether someone who's been convicted will later get exonerated or not. We just don't.
Wait, yeah, we do.
No, we don't. Why would we?
Well, in the case of Charles Ng, for example.
Yeah, but we're not talking about those cases.
He's on. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. He's on video mocking a woman he's about to rape and torture. Right. So like it was him. Right. There's no chance it wasn't him. He's not going to get exonerated. Right. So. I mean, yeah. Again, you're pointing to the edge cases and saying, hey, some of these people might be innocent, and it's true. I think the estimate is like 4% of people are innocent, right? But that 4%, I don't think, and that's 4% of like current prisoners, right, on death row. So these are people that were incarcerated sometimes in the 80s, the 70s, when our forensics abilities were far less advanced than they are right now. Right, so going forward, given that we have much better forensics capability, we have a much better way to affirm that these people were there and they did these things. Like it doesn't seem like that percentage chance that they're innocent is enough for me to take the option off the table for everybody.
No, I guess it just it is for me, because even if there's like only 2%, or even if that number was only 1%, it creates a pressure that I think that is going to lead to bad outcomes, and it's just not a necessary thing.
But the alternative is you have a bunch of people on death row who are living out this like tortured existence where they're stuck in this place they don't want to be, with awful fucking people because they're an awful person and they're surrounded by other awful people, right? And they're forced to like live out this existence, sometimes having their lives medically extended, right? They're like intervention when they have health issues. Right.
So, Doobie, I get what you're saying.
That seems like torture. That seems
I get
like
what you're saying. It's not something
torture.
Yeah, and that's why we should fix the prison system. That's why.
How do you fix the prison system if the issue is them being there?
Well, we make it less torturous. We make it less punitive in that way. And these people do need to be removed from society.
Well,
but we don't have to torture them. We don't have to do. treat them in the same way we have been treating them. Does
But
that
How
make
would
the
you? How
torture
would you
is
fix?
like
Wait, wait,
literally
wait.
not
How would you
having.
fix
Go
this?
ahead.
How would you fix this system to make it less torturous? Because you can say, well, we can make it less torturous.
Sure.
That's
Oh,
one
okay.
thing, but to not say how you're gonna fucking do it, like, or to have it demonstrated, it's just you talking. Like,
I
how are we gonna
understand.
do
Well,
this?
let's keep it clear that I am not an expert on this subject, and so all my proposed remedies is just going to be guesswork. I would look to the experts in this case to show and to see what they would say would help with these things. I think that off the top of my head, what I can think of are just giving them more access to entertainment, giving them more access to things that make life worth living, while still keeping them separated and segregated from society, might help.
Me?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, so like, yeah, because Wick's onto something there. Because one argument I heard made against this is like, well, why shouldn't we allow them to kill themselves or to have a suicide while we're waiting to reform the entire prison system? I actually think this is a mischaracterization of the issue, because there's actually like reforming the prison system is actually like there's a million different issues with the prison system, and there's a million different potential solutions that we could potentially try in different ways. So I think it's a sort of maybe not a very useful abstraction, right? So if we look at it in particular issues and particular prescriptions, and we're saying you have to give me a actual way to do this, right? An actual practical way to do this. I guess I would turn the challenge to you in that how are you going to allow like physician-assisted suicides in prison that aren't necessarily, given what we do know about suicides on average, that aren't necessarily going to end up allowing people to impulsively make suicidal decisions in a way that, if they were given the opportunity, would rather not over the long run. Of their
The same
lives.
way that we do with assisted suicides currently, right? So they have to see a doctor, then they have to see a therapist, and they have to see a psychiatrist, and they go through like checks to make sure that this isn't a spur of the moment decision, that this is actually what they want to do, right? And once that determination is made, then they get access to the assisted suicide.
But if you
So
remember
there's
correctly,
no reason you couldn't do that exact same thing in prison.
again, I don't think that's sufficient. Brento Box referenced a book that I found. I haven't read it yet, but I've looked into it, and he would probably know more about this. It's called The View from Halfway Down, and it talks about how these people may have spent months agonizing over this decision. It's not a spur of the moment, but as soon as they take that step and they feel that they are going to actually die, they regret it instantly in majority of cases. And again, it's one thing to see a therapist. It's one thing to go and talk to psychologists. It's one thing to mull it over. But until you are actually in the act of dying, you will never really know.
Wait, hold on.
You'll never really know.
Is this people who have seen a psychiatrist and shit, or is this people who are very depressed, who feel hopeless about their depression?
Yeah, there are kind of differences here.
Yeah, those are massive
parts out. Like,
well, you're dealing with somebody who's facing a reality of life in a fucking cage, right? And I don't think there's any way you could improve the prison system to remove that reality. Maybe put padding on the cage. It's still a fucking cage. They still don't have freedom. They still can't leave, right? So I don't think there's a way you can improve the system in such a way that would remove that brutal reality that we're holding them somewhere they don't want to be because they fucked up in some way. Right. So some of those people are going to feel so oppressed and so traumatized by that situation that they're going to want to check out. And I think that not allowing them to is cruel.
But here's the thing, though, is so you gave a example of like you could do it just the same way we do in prison, right? Or that we do in the world now, right? We could apply the same metrics to prison. Now, in the abstract, I would agree with you, but there's two problems with that. One, just from my personal position, I'm not very much of an advocate for physician-assisted suicide in general. So like I would have problems with that potentially, depending on the type of physician-assisted suicide. So, but now what I would also say, and I could be wrong about this, you might know more than me, but my understanding, and at the very least, if I'm wrong, what I would be willing to defend is that in a lot of cases, physician-assisted suicide is restricted along an axis, very strong axis of the terminally ill. And in some cases, I could be wrong, but in some cases, I'm not sure it's not usually extended beyond like very specific instances like that. Now, if it is, I would advocate against that, and I would be able to substantiate that.
Okay,
but that's why,
so,
just to explain the consistency, like. Yeah.
So I brought up an example earlier. I'm sure that it's like different depending on the country or state you're in, right? And I think this was in Norway. There's a young woman who had been sexually assaulted multiple times, and she could not cope with it. Right, her existence was like pain. She was in agony over what happened to her. So she went through the process. She'd gone to therapy for years. She'd been in and out of mental health hospitals, right, to try to cope with this and try to get help with this, and it just was not working for her. So she decided to get like physician assisted suicide, right? And she went through all the
Oh.
checks and balances, and she decided to do it, and she did it, right? So if somebody is telling you that their existence is agony because they're haunted by this shit that happened to them, or they're dealing with some other issue, right? And they've gone through all the therapy and they've gone through the medication and it's not working, they're still suffering. Why would you tell them that they need to continue suffering? Because you're not going to allow them to get help checking out, and this might even push some people to just kill themselves on their own.
Can I ask
Right,
you
so, like-
a question, dude? Because I'm not sure the answer to this. When it comes to physician-assisted suicides, what is the success rate? Is a weird way to say it, but those who are actually gone through the process and then actually get to the point where they're medically assisted in dying, what is the percentage where that fails, where they are medically assisted dying and then they fail to die? I would
haven't heard
imagine
of one.
it's approaching zero, correct?
Yeah, I haven't heard of one.
Yeah,
I'm pretty.
so-
I
so-
guess just to out myself, I'm pretty pro physician assistant
Okay,
suicide. Just,
but I understand. But one of the reasons why I bring this up is because, again, people will not really know, really understand until they're in the act of dying. And because of the efficacy, because of it works so well, they have no chance to change their mind once that needle's being injected or the pills are being taken or whatever, because it's almost 100% effective. And so we can't have a data on how many of those, had they had the ability, would have changed your mind, because once you do that, it's permanent. You can't go back.
just like
But
being
in
executed
the
by
situations
state,
of suicide,
ideally.
in the situations of suicide where it's not 100% effective, where it's not,
Oh, sure.
we have data on that, and it shows that a large portion of that people regret it instantly. And that is what I'm worried about here, is that a large portion of these people who make these decisions, no matter how much therapy they go through, no matter how much process they go through, when it comes to that knife's edge, so to speak, they might, and again, there's no way to know because we have no data on this,
Yeah, but Wick,
they might
I
regret
feel
it
like
instantly. And we
Okay,
will never
but-
know.
But
We
wait,
do
okay,
sort of
so
have data on
typically
this.
people who
I mean-
people who get like go through this, right, are people with like terminal illnesses who don't who have no
Not necessarily.
no hope of surviving this illness, right? So they don't want to go through the treatment, they don't want to sit there as their body decays, right, and go through the pain and put their family through the pain. They'd rather lay in bed with their family around them and go out on their own terms, right? So I don't see how those people, right? So maybe some of those people, after they take the pills or whatever, they change their mind, right? And I hope if that were to happen, there'd be someone there to help them, throw up whatever they took. But I sincerely doubt that these people who have gone through all the checks that are in place before they get to the point where they have the pills in their hand or whatever. And then it's either hate these pills that I've been arguing that I should be able to take for months, versus a life of like agony until like I die in front of my family and I feel like shit and I look like shit, and what my family remembers of me is me in the worst possible state. I don't think a lot of those people are gonna say, "Hey, I'd rather do that," if this
Okay,
is a
but that's-
decision they've made for
All
that's
evidence we have
supposition.
says they probably will, and
Yeah,
almost always
exactly.
do.
Well, I guess I get
Where's
confused
that
here as
I can
to
show you
like
some.
why
So we have
we're
evidence for
lumping these
suicide
two
in
people
general,
in the
not
same thing.
particular to
okay.
prison.
We're not talking about suicide in general. There's different things.
Right.
But we don't have
yeah.
any data to extrapolate, but there's no
Wait,
reason necessarily
so-
to demonstrate
so
that
my,
prison is particular. Like needles aren't special; they don't make people more suicidal.
So my problem with this is that people could use like suicide as a way to get out of being convicted of corporal punishment, or like there's other like investigations that show up that's involving these people, and they could just just kill themselves and not have to worry about those specific crimes.
Right. I guess
What?
Doobie, maybe you and I, would you agree that citizens have the right to physician-assisted suicide?
Yeah, I think they should have the right to that for sure.
Okay. Do you think that prisoners should not have the same rights as all citizens?
No, yeah, I don't think they should have the rights of all citizens. I mean,
Okay,
obviously,
yeah.
like,
This is
they don't.
the part that confuses me about this subject, and maybe it's confusing everybody else, because we need to figure about like what prisoners have the right to and what citizens have the right to, because I feel like a citizen having the right to physician-assisted suicide is vastly different than somebody in the prison system having the right to physician-assisted suicide. Because if they are, and don't get me wrong, a life sentence without the possibility of parole is the death penalty. I fucking wish people would start looking at more like this. I don't get it. I don't understand why we're so uncomfortable with admitting we're putting these people in prison for the rest of their lives.
Being
and they should
born
be
is the
fucking
death
dead.
penalty under that kind of definition.
Well,
I mean,
no, we're talking about somebody who went through a legal system and was hopefully convicted justly, right?
Well,
That's
both
a subject
both of them are unbelievably cruel. But no, the death penalty is succinctly like a different, like it allows for paths and opens up possibilities that a life in prison simply does not.
Well, as far as like legal paths, like to be
the norms it sets up and things like that, and the possibilities it unlocks. You know, when you say death penalty is okay for a state to do, you're essentially giving the state and institution the power over life and death, versus life in prison, while unbelievably cruel and I'm aggressively against, it's not technically giving someone control over, you know, the right to kill you, as it were. And there is still the penumbra, the shadow of an appeals there. Whereas, you know, with death,
well, you've got a shadow of appeals more. Right. Well, you do have the shadow of appeals more when you're on death row, as opposed to the ability
what do you mean by
to
that?
appeal.
What do you mean by that?
If you look at how the prison system handles the death penalty, it is vastly more expensive than dealing with people that are put in life in prison. So there are more appeals processes. That doesn't necessarily mean they get off death row, but they do get a lesser sentence.
Fucked over either way.
Right, you get a lesser sentence.
Both still have a 90% conviction rate plus.
It's pretty high. We seem to be pretty good. Look, I don't like
the death penalty and fuck life in prison. They're both completely batshit punishments that I can't believe.
That's silly.
No, because it depends if it was your sister, your mom, your dad.
Well, no, it shouldn't, because then we're talking about we're talking about retributive justice. We don't want a retributive
right.
Justice
And if
system.
you do not provide for life in prison, or where that person gets to breathe free air, right? If you do not provide for that, then we'll get a lot more vendetta justice. Also, he's right that the state should not have sway over whether or not they should be able to kill people. That way, they can't force abortions. Can't.
That doesn't make any sense, though.
I don't know. I feel like we kind of went off a different.
Wait, what?
Tangent.
Force abortions?
What?
Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Like, I guess the question is like, would we agree that physician-assisted suicide for somebody that is convicted and sentenced to life without parole, would that be a positive view in the eyes of society?
Yeah.
I think there would be financial benefits, right? Like, as far as like
financial benefits, and it's like less cruel, I think, right? Because I mean, if your reality is, hey, you're stuck in this prison with lots of shitty people, because they're here because they've done awful things just like you did.
Sure.
That sounds like a shitty existence, right? So someone wants to like not have that existence.
But it
seems cruel to force them to continue it,
right?
Because maybe part of that.
Okay, I have a question.
A deterrent.
Prime, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted myself. Dewey first, meet, and then the new person. Go ahead, Dewey.
Well, here's the thing: is that if you're willing to go and say that the state has a right to kill, right? Then the state, once you're in prison, can make your life so miserable that no matter what you're doing, you're going to try to kill yourself, whether or not you have an appeal or not. Okay.
I mean, it's even simpler than that. The less unchecked power we give to a state, the better, generally.
Well, it is checked. Right? There are tons of checks on the prison system.
the idea for me would be that if you are affirmative for being affirmative that life is good and whatever state that they're in, somebody has a continuance after this point, right?
A check that has a 98% fail rate, by the way, is not a check.
Wait, what has a 98% fail
What do
rate?
you mean a 98%
Appeals.
fail rate?
Hold on.
Oh,
what's a
because
90%?
people make
But that's not. I don't think you can appeal to that and say like, hey, just because 98% of like all appeals aren't granted does not necessarily mean that it's a bad system, right?
Yeah,
It
it
is
could
a
be that
bad
98% of
Well,
appeals are
how
bad.
about this?
I
If
think-
if
Like, what do you
if
mean?
you're put in life in prison in, for example, one of the Scandinavian countries, and recently somebody said, well, my human rights are being abused because I didn't get a PS5. I have to play the PS4.
Well, it's
Yeah,
actually a
I'd say
PS2 versus
fuck
a
that guy.
PS3. Like, what difference does that make for this argument, though?
Because maybe
He should be
in
lucky that he's playing
Scandinavia.
fucking games at all. I mean,
Yeah, well, come on,
well,
guy.
see,
You know,
that's what I'm trying to say. It's because many of our state prisons are basically torture chambers. Many of them they're pretty bad. Many of them don't meet human needs, nutrition, those types of things. But if we have a Scandinavian prison where we realize that we're not there to abuse the person, but we're trying to, no matter what they do, we're going to release with the goal of releasing that person into society.
Yeah, rehabilitate
30
and hold them.
Maybe
Well, no, but
30 years.
Wait, hold on. But dude, couldn't you like agree that some people probably should not and could
Yes, but
not be
that's a
rehabilitated?
minority.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't matter that they're a minority. We need to account for them in the system that we're talking about.
Yes.
I think that
And
is
we will, but, like-
that's a question of people that we're having, right? Of people
Right.
that are
Currently,
one
our systems are built around
justly convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I think we have to start there, otherwise we go off on different tangents that aren't
so
effective.
let's go to let's go to meet. Let's go to Spirit Toby. King of William, you've been here the whole time. You haven't said anything. I want to make sure you get your spot, and then Wick.
Hey, so yeah, I feel like we might be talking past a few things, or maybe talking past a few presumptions. So, a few things to address. One, I don't really care about rights. I feel like when we talk about rights exist as deontological tools to distill like cost benefit analyses, as far as I'm concerned. And so when I look at the cost benefit analysis here, I still feel like I haven't seen demonstrated how you're not necessarily by any measure that we can look at that has available, that people suicidal, and by extension probably people who are suicidal in prison, at least overwhelmingly outside of prison, almost all the time, would be better off not being allowed to kill themselves. And so I don't see how that doesn't extend to prison. And also I just want to point out that there's two things that aren't being discussed here that often come up in these debates. One thing that isn't discussed very often, which is that this opens up the possibility for physicians to basically abuse their position and essentially get away with murdering people if they wanted to in some cases. And second off, also if we're looking at the laws that already exist in certain places in America for these things, from far I can tell, I would be down for allowing them in prison because it's just for terminally ill people. So I don't see a problem with allowing that in prison as well.
Okay, Spirit Toby.
Yeah, it is fun to be with the frog on this one. I got to say that. The first thing is I would say that the prisoners shouldn't be overly punished for what they're doing, and if they want to opt out for different reasons, they should be able to have that right. And they're in prison, so they would almost be required to have some help with that. But I think I want to go back to the point between Doobie and Professor Meat. That got skipped over a little bit was the people who survive suicide and who change their mind halfway down. We need more information on that, what those numbers were, the follow-up with those things, and how they changed their lives, and whether that could be implemented with other people as well too. Professor Meat said something very quickly back to Doobie on that, and then we moved on. I'm sorry, I don't remember what that was, but I think that's a very important point to get straightened out.
Right, so I'll try to find the papers. I might have linked them when I was in the Discord the other night. I'll try to find them again. Maybe I'll bookmark them. But so the two things that I remember off the top of my head that I looked at were one, there was some year that we like surveyed the 28 people that survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge trying to kill themselves, and all 28 of them said that they were happy they didn't kill themselves. And I think when I looked, it was something like 80% of people who try to commit suicide don't die by suicide later. Like people who try to commit suicide and live, they almost
Okay,
always.
but this is a different group, though. Right?
It is a different group, but the thing is so I understand that you're trying to differentiate prison, and that might be a worthwhile differentiation to make. But
Not
you could
just
also
prison, but, like,
differentiate
people who
between
go through
every
this
single
suicide
subset
process.
arbitrarily of suicide.
No, that's
populations.
silly. That's silly. Okay, so somebody who
You
jumps
can
off the Golden
demonstrate
State, someone who jumps off the Golden State Bridge, right? Having because they're like upset about the girlfriend leaving them, or they lost a job, or whatever the fuck it is, right?
I'll be making my
So this person, right, is like fucking galaxies away in terms of their thought process and going to the suicide typically, than somebody who's gone through the process, sending a written request to like a medical practitioner, meeting with them in person, being referred to a therapist and a psychiatrist, and going through all these things for like months, for months. And at every point, they're push and their question: Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? And they're offered other ways out of this situation, right? For months. Right, and then they get to the end of it, and at the end of it, when they've been cleared, there's still another 10 days that's required for them to reflect on this thing and make sure they want to do this decision, right? And then when it happens, they're not jumping off a bridge. They have a doctor there to ensure that they're comfortable and that they go away peacefully, right? That is that
why we don't do
situation
that in our current
is miles away from fucking just someone who jumped off a bridge or shot themselves because they were upset about something.
Do you know why we don't allow that in our current assisted suicide programs? Because I do.
Allow what?
Why we don't allow that determination to be made for people outside of the terminally ill in our current assisted suicide programs.
Wait, hold on.
Because Jack
the ones that I've looked at, I can't find one
fucking spokesperson for physician
Okay,
assisted suicide.
just tell us the thing.
Well, so here's some basic principles, all right? If we can identify, like I've said, that people generally would be better benefited across, as far as we can tell, across the category of suicidal people, if we can tell that they would generally be better benefited by being stopped from committing suicide instead of enabled, then we can extrapolate that the exact same thing would apply to the prison population. Now, and the thing is now you're talking about going through this long process of verifying that those aren't those people. But here's the thing. Many people struggle with depression over long periods of time. And most people a vast majority of people who suffer with depression are not like literally constantly suicidal, right? There's all this evidence suggests that suicidal is like this impulsive thing. And if you are one of the very, 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 very few people to which it seems to be consistently, persistently chronic, then you are still statistically likely at almost all times to end up possibly being the person who gets better. And so the thing is you never know that you're the person who will never get better until you die and you never got better.
But in this
and
case,
that sort of sucks, but we will
in this
end up
case, what
missing
you're
out on
saying-
the opportunity to help people if we assume otherwise.
Okay, but we can't help these people. What you're saying is,
We
hey,
don't know that. You
we
don't
can
know that.
we can make them comfortable with being in prison forever because we're not going to let them out. Like,
You don't think that anyone ever like is suicidal for long periods of time and ends up getting better ever? You don't think that ever
of
happens?
course, that's not what I just said. I'm saying that these people, the ones that we're talking about, the ones who are in prison, right, and they're in there for life because of something they did, and there's no possibility that they're ever getting out, right? If they're depressed or upset about them being in a cage forever, right, and not able to do what the fuck they want with their life, and this is the reason they want to leave, the way that you would fix that is either make them comfortable with being in this cage somehow, or you take them out of the cage, and we're not going to do that, right? So and if we go through a months-long process like we do with medically assisted suicide currently, to ensure by having them talk to therapists and counselors and psychiatrists and yada yada, going through every other possibility.
This is not what we're doing,
and they
Brian.
still. And yes, it is what we do. And they
No,
still
not
say,
only for the
and they
terminally ill.
still
Only for
okay,
the terminally
okay.
ill.
I understand. I understand. But we're not saying that this currently happens with people on death with like life sentences. We're saying that it should happen, right? I understand that's not the current law. So if
people
they've
within
gone
6
through that
months of
entire
dying, sure.
process, if they've
Not even
gone
a
through that
proposed
entire
law.
process, they've gone through that entire process, right? And they still want to end their lives. Like, why shouldn't we let them?
So okay, if you
Because
follow the
prison
current
is
practice,
direct.
Sorry, hold on.
within 6 months of death.
Finish your point.
Yeah, I would just say if we were limited to the current standards of limiting it to within 6 months of death, then sure, I would be okay with that.
But also,
Okay.
That's most standards.
Sure.
general
We'll go
standards.
to William Wick and Dr. K.
Yeah, I don't think this is. I mean, I think libertarians love hypotheticals, and I'm not a libertarian, you know. And this is not something that is like before us as something that we could talk about, like a proposed law that might go into effect or anything like that. And I think this. So this is really about Doobie, and so Doobie reaches for. It's not about the people on death row whom Doobie seems to know a lot about. And he sort of he stared into the evil in their lives, and he's making essentially he's trying to create kind of a wedge for a kind of a eugenic principle about some people basically deserving to die, and also accepting everybody's accepting the conditions of prisons, which of course should be reformed, and people do. Yeah, people do propose all the time ways of mitigating that or ways of reforming that, and those are much more realistic than the hypothetical that Doobie is proposing. So that's what I was saying.
I agree with this.
Okay, so first off, you're an idiot. Secondly, this has already happened in other countries. Right? In other countries, there's been prisoners who were in prison for life who have opted instead for
Name the country.
suicide. Belgium, and they've been given the ability to do that. Right, so I'm saying that's a good thing, and I think that we should have that here. This is not like outlandish. I'm not trying to eugenics people. I have other policies for doing that. But what I'm saying here is that if these people want to end their lives, and we're not going to take them out of prison, and the prison is the reason they want to end their lives, then it seems cruel to force them to stay in that situation.
Okay, so
the conditions. King of William, you can respond if you want, and then Wick, and then Dr. K.
Okay, it still is not a thing proposed. It's Doobie's thing that he knows about the law in Belgium. It's something that he's interested in, right? But it's not something that's before us in this current climate. So we are going back to what Black X Yamato said. Well, if you say how you're going to reform the prisons, if you're not doing that, you're just talking. Well, that's all we're doing is just talking. This is just all hypothetical.
Welcome to online debate panels.
Right. So then. Don't be phony and say we're just talking, because we're just talking, right?
I think I'm giving a pretty clear policy that I'm advocating for.
Okay.
Right? So, I don't know what you're bitching about.
Eugenics light.
Wick.
It's not eugenics.
Okay.
It is too.
So
it's very light eugenics.
I just want to be. I want to bring this back from the personal insults. I want to try to kind of encapsulate it into the problem and then possible solutions.
What were the personal insults, Wick?
Oh my God, just mentioning Doobie and doing this weird implication. But I don't want to get into this.
What's the weird implication? No, you said that. What's the weird implication?
One second. I got it.
What I said.
We have a
Wick,
problem.
what are you saying? What are you saying is my
I got to clear something up really quickly.
And then what is my implication that you say I'm just trying to pass off?
You're implicating eugenics.
What is it?
I have a point about
it is eugenics.
That has
been I'm ready to argue it.
Doobie, what were you going to say real quick?
Please.
I'd like to clear something up really quickly. So I looked up the guy just to make sure that my memory wasn't failing me, right? The guy in Belgium. And actually, so they did grant his request for the mercy killing, they called it. But a year later, they reversed that decision, and now he's stuck in a mental ward. Right, so I'm sure his life is wonderful now, stuck in the psychiatric ward. We know how wonderful those are.
Okay, let's go to Wick, please.
We have a problem. Prisons suck so much it makes people want to kill themselves. This is a problem. I think we all agree here that this is not an acceptable situation, that we should not have this situation. Yes. Some people on this panel have proposed a solution to that problem is to allow for suicides in certain cases. And I think that's wild. I think that's wild because why would that be our solution? This problem can be fixed through other means than death.
Well,
the problem can be fixed through making the prison system exist that it doesn't make one suck so much that it makes the inmates want to kill themselves. This is a very clear, why are we going to suicide as a solution? This is wild to me. It's out of I don't know. I just don't understand it.
Well, like you said,
I can side with Wick.
But like you said before, we would have to talk about those issues. Is there anything in particular that you would like to change?
Yes, a lot about the prison system that I would like to say. Okay. I would like them to have it to be less punitive in nature. Solitary confinement is torture. I would like that removed. That for one. We should have them access to more entertainment, to reading, to education. Just because we do need, and I recognize the need to segregate certain people from society, sometimes forever. So there are certain people that we just need to segregate from society. They cannot be rehabilitated. We just cannot have that. But that does not mean we need to torture them. We can provide them an existence that does not make them want to kill themselves.
If you do with the first
Remove
principle,
the
then you
forced
come up with the
labor.
second.
We know.
If you say that there are some people who cannot be reformed, then you come up with the second thing, that you should kill them. And that's what we're
Not
talking about.
necessarily.
Whether we allow them to make their own choice for suicide. But of course, what are we saying? We would like them to die.
William,
We'd
you're-
like to
you're
give them the
attacking a
opportunity
ghost
to
right
die.
now.
We know.
What? Why?
I mean, like,
You're attacking a point that it didn't make, dude. Like,
Oh yeah,
come
what
on,
is
man.
that? See,
Oh my
no,
fucking
no,
God,
because he's saying there are some people who are not reformed. Did he say that? That
Yeah,
some people
but that
cannot
doesn't
be
mean I want to
reformed,
kill
right?
them.
he said,
Right, no,
that
but I'm
they're
saying that
no, he
but
said
what
there
I'm
are
saying
people
is
that like he's saying that there's people that like we deem to not be in society like anymore. At least that's what I think he said.
right, because, and this is what I
But
want to
he's
get
never
to. 'Cause
said
I'm
anything
making
about killing them.
admittedly a radical point, but I can defend it, which is that when you start to say that there are people who you cannot reform, that there are some people that you're basically giving yourself the ability to make decisions for them that you would not make for other people. In other words, I remember I got in this big argument when I was in my political science class. We were taking this judicial behavior class, and they were talking about the conditions of prisons, that people in life, would go into solitary confinement, that there were rats in the prison, that they would be served rotten food and all this kind of stuff. And of course, they're mostly conservatives in the class. They would say, well, these people committed a crime. It's not going to be the Holiday Inn, yada yada yada, and all this stuff. And my point was, and it was lost on them too, and it's probably going to be lost on you guys. But maybe there's somebody in the audience that it's not lost on.
Wait, are you
Just
trying to call
because
us
you
all,
put
like-
just because you put somebody in prison, or just because somebody has committed a crime, does not obligate me to lose my humanity.
Okay.
Okay. So when
sorry, hold on. Finish your point. King William, I thought you were done. King William, then I want to hear Wick's response, and then Dr. K, Professor Meat.
So in other words, I am locating the genesis of eugenics, if you will, which is to say there's a point of departure where you lose your humanity in trying to solve these problems by monstering people so that you can justify abuses against them.
Okay, Wick, you can respond.
Again, this is assuming a lot. This is taking and you're putting a lot of weight onto me saying that there's groups of people.
It's
and
called
I don't know how
erudition.
big it's called fucking stupidity is what it's called. It's
Oh,
called
yeah? Well, then
fucking
go for it.
stupidity. And
Let's
let me
let's
explain
do it
why.
then.
All right.
Yes,
all
if
right.
you would allow me to
Oh,
finish.
man.
Because not every logic train needs to be followed to its autistic conclusion. It just doesn't. We can get off at any fucking point.
Where's the personal installs?
So
there you go.
What we can do
Okay, so both
is say
Wick
that there's
and
a
the
group of
frog
people.
are
Let me
correct.
fucking finish. There's a group of people who we can recognize that I believe. Okay, I'll start by this. I believe that people should be in prison until they're able to be rehabilitated, and we can obviously see how a certain group of people, some people, I don't know that number, maybe 1%, maybe less than 1%, just will never be able to be rehabilitated into society. And we have to know, how do we handle those people? They're still people. It doesn't mean I want to kill them, and saying that makes you stupid. It makes you stupid. Saying that I have monstered them or otherized them makes you stupid, because all I am recognizing it is because they are not rehabilitated. We need to segregate them from society. This is a just thing to do, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't make them want to kill themselves. That
Well, you've
isn't
otherized
torture.
them just
That
as much
isn't
as you have
terrible. It's not
autistic people.
otherizing. Stop it. You're
Yes, you
making
did.
yourself sound dumb.
It is literally author. Oh, to you, but that's nothing.
Okay,
to
so
me.
let's move on.
Prime, I'm ready to talk again.
Sorry, what? Hold on. Wick. Sorry, so Wick was Dr. K. Then Professor Meat. This is Dewey. You had your hand up. And sorry, Spirit Toby, you want to go next after that? It's fine.
Yes.
Dr. K.
I thought you said Wick first.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Wick did go, but Dr. K.
Yeah,
first.
personally, I find the underlying sort of framework that this is all based on to be frankly really, really disgusting. The fact is, is that the United States, where most of the people on this panel are from, has by and large the largest prison population on Earth, right? And if we had anything resembling a rational, justice system, we would probably cut 90% of our prison population and like release them, because the majority of people there are there for non-offenses, are there for drug offenses, or are there because we have such a bloated system that relies on plea bargains rather than actually seeing cases through to their logical conclusion. Or they're there on immigration offenses, which aren't actually offenses because, it's not a crime to cross a border. And so with all that, our prison population is unbelievably bloated. The methods we use in our prisons are unbelievably cruel. Forced labor is allowed in our prison systems. Isolation is allowed in our prisons. Violence by the officers, violence by other inmates is overlooked. Sexual abuse is overlooked. These are torture chambers through and through, and they're mechanisms by which many organizations in our country make money. The private prison system is rapidly expanding and is attempting to, it literally gives police stations, for instance, in Louisiana, arrest quotas. So the fact is I do not feel comfortable talking about prisoner-assisted suicide when we have built, a machine built to torture humans and drive them to that point in the first place.
Precisely.
It feels no, I'm not done. It feels absolutely disgusting to talk about this and to use it for internet clout points and to use it as sort of a verbal football when, so many of us here are comfortable and have no vested interest in this actual issue and don't have friends and family who are being tortured by this system even as we speak. And this casuality that we deal with this and we play around with this is gross.
Okay.
But, carry on, gentlemen.
Professor Me?
I'm not going to stop you.
Hey, I have to admit I agree with Doobie sort of in the sense of what he said earlier about we should talk about specifics instead of sort of talking about the abstracted, like, what sort of environment, like what are the problems with society and what like sort of environment might we live in. And if we're talking about, I do agree that he has a more particularized idea that I would like to focus on, because I feel like my question of like it's hasn't really been addressed in terms of like how are you going to institute this policy in a way that will not likely, by all evidence that we seem to have, result in allowing people to kill themselves that would have rather they weren't allowed to kill themselves if we gave them the chance to continue living.
Can I just point out really quickly? So it's actually bullshit that most people in prison are there for like non-violent drug offenses. Most people in prison, majority of them, are there for violent offenses like murder, assault, rape, yada yada yada. Right. So you can.
You mean in the federal system?
No.
In the federal system.
No, I think even at the state level.
No.
Most people.
If you're looking at a net aggregate of prison populations across state, federal, and private systems, no, actually, most are not there for violent offenses.
That is just not true based on everything.
No, that is not just true.
Okay, all right, then let's
yeah,
follow.
it is
You are
just
blatantly
true.
spouting.
I've found
you know what to
and
do.
you're-
if you have a different source, post it. I'm going to post my source, right? That goes through state and local and federal prisons, and breaks them down by the crime. And drug offenses are a tiny proportion versus like violent crime in all systems.
All right, go ahead.
What about my question though?
Professor Me, if your thing wasn't answered, then we'll go to Dewey and Spirit Toby, and then Redhead Man.
Did you want me to repeat my question?
Oh, did you? Yeah, I don't know if it wasn't answered. Sure.
Well, sorry, it was up to Doobie, but like I guess I'll repeat it. So you do have this prescription you're giving, but within this prescription, how are you going to do it in a way that isn't going to, by all evidence that we have, end up? It seems that it's going to end up necessarily, very likely, resulting in allowing people to kill themselves. It would have rather, if they were given the chance to live, would have in the long run rather we didn't. So how are you going to enable this prescription in a way that doesn't result in that?
Again, you have to go through all the checks and balances that we have currently for people who want medically assisted suicide.
I think it's bad when the other countries do it. If you're suggesting we don't use the American standard that we're using in other states, you're suggesting.
I've said that from the start. I've said from the start that hey, the current standard, it seems that we only allow this for terminally ill people. I think we should expand that first off. I think
So
that we should allow people to go through the same system if they're traumatized by some event like the woman in Norway, right? But and I would further extend it to people in prison who are going to be in there for a very, very long time, and rather than face that reality, they'd like to just check out. I think I've made that very clear.
right, but how are you going to do that in a way that does not result in people being enabled to kill themselves that would have rather we didn't if we gave them the chance?
The exact same way, again, the exact same way
They
we currently
don't do it.
there's-
They don't
Yes,
do it.
they do.
You're assuming
There-
they
there
don't.
are
paying
checks on there.
attention. You're not
There
paying
are
attention.
checks on
You're not
Just
understanding
like we talked
me.
about earlier.
You're
They-
both begging the
No.
question right now. You're both
No,
assuming
we're
that
not.
your points are
They
valid.
don't
for
just
this. You're engaging in
check a
circular
box
logic.
and say, "Hey, I want to help kill myself," and then they get the medication. No, it takes months. They go through a long process where they talk to multiple
Okay,
medical
you might have
professionals.
forgot my earlier answer about how that isn't addressed by the point of the fact that we can't. There's two things, right? There's two big problems. First off, this opens up the possibility of doctors being able to enter into abusive relationships where they basically murder people and push people towards suicide where they don't
Silly.
necessarily have to.
They
That
speak to
is-
multiple
that is being
doctors.
discussed- that is being
Wait,
discussed
They
wait,
speak
in
to
this
multiple
forever.
doctors.
And
in this
secondarily,
process.
you can't actually accurately identify, and there's lots of debate about this, but I'm willing to engage in it. You can't accurately identify people who are not going to be able to get better because you don't actually know that they're not going to be able to get better until
They
they
literally
fucking
do
die.
this in the process. They literally do this when
No,
they're
they
going through this process.
they would fail.
Yes,
I don't.
they
I don't.
they
No, they don't.
absolutely do. Yes,
try.
They do.
They try.
Have you ever looked at? You're very passionate about
They
this. Have you ever
try
looked
and
it
then
up?
form a conclusion, but that doesn't mean that it's right.
Well, okay, but again, so if if this person is saying, "Hey, I want to check out if this is something I've been struggling with for months, yada yada," and then the doctors, and they speak to multiple doctors, by the way. So if there's some serial killer doctor, well, hey, he can't approve this by himself. There's other people involved too, other medical professionals.
Yeah, I'm
involved who
pretty
go
sure
through
an
the same process.
investigation, like an investigation.
Yeah, it's
starts,
not something
right?
that happens quickly.
Do you think
It's not
anyone's
something
ever
that happens quickly at
suicidal
all.
for
Right.
years and then ends up getting better later?
Sure, right? But what I'm saying
then what are
is
we
that
talking about?
if they go,
Is it
through
going to
the-
be? How long is the process going to be? 10
okay,
years?
This is really dumb. So you're saying
I
that
agree.
if there's a possibility that they could get better ever, right, and get better in
Because
this
they
case,
almost always do.
is no longer
Let
the
me finish.
choice.
Let me finish. Go,
You
Diggy.
shouldn't allow them the bodily autonomy to decide to like end their life, right, in a peaceful way.
We violate bodily autonomy all the time for the benefit of society. So yes, because they almost certainly will fit into that category of people that can get better. Almost always.
You don't even fucking know that. Right?
Don't know
You're
for sure in an
assuming this.
individual
You're
case, but we
assuming
know
this
on
based
average
on
that they almost
based.
certainly
No,
will.
you're assuming this again based on people who have tried to kill themselves and survived. Right? Try to kill themselves in spur of the moment situations where there were no medical professionals and no therapists and none of this involved. Right? These are not comparable groups.
Okay.
I am proposing that we cannot know. You are proposing that we can
That's
come
silly.
to that determination. But my evidence is a best evidence argument. You can't provide anything other than the fact that some
No, it's
psychiatrists
not.
come to
Your
a
evidence
conclusion.
is not phrased in the correct area of which the
I
question is
disagree.
being proposed.
Let's go to Dewey and Spirit Toby, then Dustin.
Well, my experience is probably a little different than most of this. Anyway, my experience has been is that the first of all, anytime we're putting anybody in prison, they're under duress. People, many times, there are a lot of people. The idea of them going to prison might make them kill themselves. Okay, just the idea of having to go to prison might make them kill themselves. Second, if we're going to experience people under duress, then we've got to recognize that just by arresting people and putting them in jail for 6 months and waiting for a trial because they can't get bail may have detrimental results on their mental health, their ability to deal with authority figures, that sort of thing. Even if they're innocent, they're guilty. And my experience also dictates life is that the brain is a different box. You can take an x-ray of healthy brains and you can't really tell if this person is depressed, this person is a genius, this person is doobie. I mean, you can't tell the difference. Okay? I mean, and so therefore, if you want to say, as people grow up, they could suffer from something they don't understand, like sexual dimorphism. They could have different types of experiences. Many things in our society are not diagnosed until well into their 25, 27 years old. Schizophrenia, those types of things often don't jump out at people till they become 30 years old. But who are we going to arrest? Is it going to be the guy the clever thief that just quietly goes about his business? Or is it going to be the guy who holds up a bank with a banana? You know, and so if we're really going, and then what happens? They start traveling in the system. Then maybe they hit a cop. Maybe something else happens. I think that in reality, and here's another thing: my culture will translate whether or not I'm going to be arrested by a cop or not. Because when I'm sitting in Utah, I don't know if any other places, but when I'm sitting in Utah, and I was having somebody drive me around for a while, cop pulled him over, and I said. He was Mexican, and then I said, "Excuse me, why are you pulling me over? Why are you pulling me over, officer?" And he goes, and he totally changed the face, and his whole complexion changed when I was sitting in the back seat, and he realized this person is working for me, driving me to place. So my experience, and by the way, what your accent can be, wherever you're from, may change the way that interaction can go down. So we have to realize that people can get trapped in these systems very easily, and you can't really tell. He's right. You can't tell if somebody wants to commit suicide, even if they tell you that they want to commit suicide, right? So if you're going to talk to somebody, you're saying you're going to talk somebody down, maybe we should investigate why they feel that way, and maybe some cries for help. But if somebody steps in front of a train, right, at 75 miles an hour at a blind bend, that's not a cry for help. That's when somebody trying to commit suicide. You're saying that there's going to be always a system. I think it's more of a middle class to upper class thing where they're actually going to be diagnosed, where they're actually going to see a doctor. And when we go through our prison systems, we use our prison systems like we used to use our mental health care facilities. And it doesn't work.
People in prison have access to mental health care, just FYI.
Not very good health care. And you, okay, I'll tell you what.
Not very good.
No, it's not even close. And it's not not treatment.
People in prisons can't shop around mental health care the way we can on the outside. And that's a huge
oh my god,
it's a huge factor. And if you don't think that, then you fucking
I'm sorry. They're pressed because they can't shop around for mental health care, of course.
Yes. Same with doctors and certain illnesses.
Okay, really for example, GB, if you were going to be coming in, I'd say patient presents with, mild depression, partial, stuff like that. But and I might say some borderline authority issues, kind of things like that, right? But when we go in and we are talking to different people, we don't know what their life is, and many psychiatrists only have 10 to 15 minutes. That's it. Then they're going to give them.
It isn't the case in the prison system, first off. Secondly, when people do send in a written request.
What is not the case? Excuse me.
A written request is basically an application. It's not the case that prisoners, when they see a therapist or a psychiatrist, they have 10 to 15 minutes. That is not the case.
Maybe a lot less. But when
no, not a lot less.
Okay. They have good healthcare. Is what you're saying?
You're driving me.
Okay, they're spending money
regularly
on
get like fucking.
Prisoners?
Oh my!
Wait! Why do we have to swear? Just
look it up if you'd like to. They have access.
I don't have to look it up.
You wouldn't be saying dumb shit if you did. Okay.
Oh, really? Dumb shit?
Yes,
really?
Dumb shit. I think the implication
when we can't win the
everybody
argument,
in prison,
we win
that everybody
the
in prison is there because they're a victim and they just got caught up in something and they didn't mean to do it, and God, they got wrapped up and they were so afraid to say no to the cop is stupid. Lots of people in prison because they actually did bad shit and they should be in prison. Right?
Maybe
and
one
those
of the
people,
things that they did
some of those people are going to be in prison for a very long time because they should be in prison for a very long time.
Right? And they were resistant or non-conforming.
No, you're being an idiot right now. Again, most people in the prison system are there for violent crimes, right?
They're there for violent crimes, and that's the only reason.
Violent crimes. Yeah, look it up.
Well,
okay.
I posted it in chat.
Called the Uniform Crime Report, right? Which I had.
What's violence? It's so stupid. Right? They're in there. Most people in prison are not innocent. They're in there because they did a bad thing. They got caught.
Not innocent, right?
Right? Yeah, most of them are not innocent. That is, I don't. You have this idea of the prison system, like we just throw people in there for looking at the cops wrong. Maybe that does happen sometimes, but the vast majority of these fucking people are not those people.
Really? Is it true that
people are because they took
go ahead, Dewey, finish your point. And then after that, we're going to go to Spirit Toby, Dustin. Was it Liquid? You got your hand up? All right. And then me. I see you. So, Dewey, you can finish your point.
See, here's my problem. If if the vast majority of people are in prison, we would have a representation of all our society, right? So let's say if we had 57% of the people were white people, then we should have 50% of our prisoners be white people in prison.
No, what?
No,
Why
I'm
would
not
that be the
talking
case?
that.
Absolutely.
Wait,
Absolutely.
what?
I'm for this.
Oh my
I'm
God.
for this. I haven't met the quota. Wick, guess what's happening?
Hey, man,
Wick, guess what's happening, Wick?
Why me? There's so many white people here. Why me?
If we're representing society, you say, okay, all people commit
funny
crimes at
stuff.
the same level. They do. I mean,
No, they don't. They
They
literally
don't.
do not. Yeah, people.
They don't.
If you want to break it down to racial groups, they do not commit crimes at the same level. And obviously, the reasons for that is socioeconomic. But it is not the case that
so
currently
you
across
don't
the board,
think-
all
okay.
racial groups commit crime at the same level. That
How
is not-
about
that
this?
is not true.
How about this? Are there
Rape's a white man crime.
Right. Right. So if I steal $100,000 from a bank, right, by hacking the bank, I'm probably not going to go to jail.
How
I
many
might go to
fucking
jail.
people hack the bank and steal money? Like, what do you? Okay,
Well, they were-
I'm gonna be. I feel like you're drunk.
Engaging.
I'm gonna be nice with
I
you.
don't know
Okay.
about.
No,
I
what
don't
I'm
know about
saying
hacking
is-
the bank, but boy, the bank robbery.
Can I just make a point? In January 6th,
I
about
hope
10% of
you
the
can.
people, about 10% of the people were military. They were like, well, that's a lot of people that are military. No, it's not. It just represents our society. And
That's
we
not,
wanna
why would
say-
it work like that?
So what? Are you saying
I
that
love
people
you,
in the
Huey.
military fucking hack the bank? That's what you trying to say?
No, I think that
He's
you
saying
win.
that all groups of people. Okay, not so. First you did racial groups. Now you're saying veterans. Now all groups of people and all these different like subcategories commit crime at the same rate, right? And do like different crimes. Like
Well,
it's
can I
just
just
not.
say that-
It's just not true. Like I don't.
Oh,
like, I don't know.
wait. Here's a good way to get.
In fact, I'll give you a good one. Cops, like I think like initially it was 40%. Now it's like 27% of cops do like domestic violence shit. Right? They beat their wives or whatever. Right? So that subcategory is much more likely to beat their wives. Right? So you can say it's the stress of the job. It's the personalities type of people that tend to get into cops. Yada yada yada. Right? But just groups of people don't all commit crime at the same rates.
I'm going to introduce you to the concept of a non sequitur. Okay.
Oh my god.
Now, what we'd like to do is we'd like to stick to our argument, which was like this: if you have a society, right, and you have 10 white people, and you know that 20% of those people are going to be criminals, they don't differentiate by the type of race that they are, because I don't really believe in race. Or tannins don't commit crimes. Okay, tannins do not commit crimes. There's all kinds of levels of people that commit crime. Okay. Now, what kinds of crimes that we like to investigate, what kinds of crimes we like to prosecute are very different. Your argument says that if we go look up Prime, could you help me with the Uniform Crime Report really quick? Right? And
You want me to help you?
The uniform crime. Like, are we looking
I
up
can bring
the
up
amount of
something
people-
specific for you.
by the
I can bring up
FBI.
something specific for you really quickly.
And
So
before you do that, hey, how about the channel? Thank you, Red on Thought for the 5 subs and Crazy for Coke for
Thanks, man.
resubbing for your Prime Gaming. Hey, you can hop on the channel. You start the hype stream. Wasn't that pretty cool, right? Guys, sub to the channel, give bits or give subs to make that hype chain happen. And support this community, right? And if you're enjoying this conversation or whatever the fuck is happening here. All right, go ahead. Doobie, and then I want to wrap this up soon because I do gotta go to some other people. So Doobie, go ahead.
I want to give you something very specific. Right? I'm gonna give you very. So I got into not some trouble. Just people were upset with me for bringing this up a while back. But in New York City, 90% of the rapes and murders in New York City, right, and this is taken from people actually convicted and from victim reports. Right, 90% of them are committed by Black and brown people. Right, in New York
I'd like
City.
to see the rape kits.
And this is going back like fucking decades, right? So in New York City,
Let me put it
if
this
a rape or if a rape or a murder happens in
think
New York
that we
City,
need to-
there's a 90% chance that it is going to be a Black or brown person. That is just the reality.
Incident
Right? So
report is you know what that is?
yeah, this is coming from victim statements first off, and convictions.
I don't like victim statements. I only like to see
And
I want
convictions.
hard evidence
You're just denying reality because it's saying
conviction is not evidence of a particular group's behavior.
Oh God.
Conviction is a behavior.
I'm not talking about the behavior of a group. I don't think all black and brown people in New York are going out raping, murdering people. The percentage of black and brown people who actually do shit like that it's fucking really, really, really tiny, right? But I'm telling you that within this group, right, the tiny portion of people in this group who do this kind of shit, you're gonna find more people in this group than you are in Asians, for example, or in fucking Armenians, right?
Can you
right?
post that study?
Sure, it's not a study. It comes from New York City's like statistics themselves.
Oh, they're
you're saying okay.
I'll post
we
it.
gotta move on. We gotta move on.
Appreciate
We got a lot of people waiting. All right. But again, how about that hype train sub channel, give bits or give subs? Help us out. That's how we do this. How we keep this all going up and running, so we can do. We can yell at each other. Okay. So let's go to Spirit Trip. He's been waiting quite kindly, right? Then we'll go to Destin and Wick and Professor Meat.
Okay, so both to bring this back to prison and assisted suicide in there, both Wick and the Frog are correct. They're both making excellent points, and they're not mutually exclusive. And it is a really shitty proposition to say, hey, let's allow prisoners to kill themselves as before we talk about like prison reform. But we are. That's what we're doing. And so obviously the solutions to make that obsolete, or not to even have that as a choice for prisoners to kill themselves, is to make prison be better to some extent. So, but a padded cage still is a cage, and that's what we're talking about. And we're talking about the level of the punishment fitting the crime, which is what we tend to like a lot in America. And if they just have the option to be able to check out because of whatever crime they do, then do they still have that right, is what we're talking about. So keeping them around to punish them for a longer time because we feel better about it, or that it may cause reform for them, is also equally part of the question. And our society isn't really looking at that combination of different things. And to Professor Meat, how do we institute this policy of doctors murdering people? Well, a little bit more, and not everything, because I don't know everything, but a little bit more than what Doobie was saying of, well, let's just, do what we've been doing. That's enough. Then Professor Meat, we would raise that standard. We would look at doing a little bit more checking into it, so that we can help them be a little bit better off in a padded cage to get through their time. But really, it's more about reforming them and helping them get through things so that they can come back into society. But Doobie's point of, if a lot of people in prison, or not a lot of people, he's talking about like those people that are not... Well, he's talking about both kinds. All right. He's talking about the people that aren't going to get reformed no matter what, but a lot of them just are going to be there for a long time. So if we say you have to be punished and you can't check out, is that then fair to let them have that option? But obviously, Wick, your point of doing other things to reform prison to be better for rehabilitation would obviously be a much, much better approach.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's go to Dustin. Wait quite patiently.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of just going to echo a lot of your points here, Spirit, but I'm hoping that this line of questioning will actually get us to the fact of the matter. Doobie, so the way that I'm following down you down this road, I want you to at least kind of like yes or no if we agree on these things, right? The person has to be justly convicted and sentenced for life in prison, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I'd be okay with making it going beyond justly convicted and saying that they need to admit to the crime, right? They need to say, hey, I did this.
Okay, so the qualification to get the grant of assisted suicide, to have the ability to commit physician-assisted suicide, is an admittance of guilt.
Yes, there's no longer appeals. They're no longer saying, hey, I didn't do this. They're saying, I did this thing.
along with already justly convicted, correct? So we're
Yes.
trying to eliminate as much percentage possibility as we possibly can in our judicial system.
Right.
Okay. This also takes into account that our prison systems is completely angelic and treats people in the best humane way possible, as if they were living a possibly successful and fulfilling life as much as possible within a prison. So no abuse, no maltreatment, no anything.
Yeah.
Okay. So some people are not going to like going down this mythical line of questioning. I don't blame some people, especially if we're going to talk about the American prison system. We have a lot of fucking problems, and if you are not comfortable with this line of questioning and going this far deep, that's fine. I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're
a beta.
justified. I think you're a justified person. The problem is that you just have a issue with hypotheticals because it doesn't seem politically achievable.
Lack of background.
That's fine. So what else we're going to have to agree on is that that they have the right through their bodily autonomy to end their life, and they are of sound mind. So depression is not just caused by feeling bad. This is a systematic, endless depression, like the example you gave, similar to a terminally ill disease where there is no longer able to bear that problem.
Right.
Okay. I think Spirit brings up this greatly intensely point of, if we have all those qualifiers, do we as a society value the idea of retributive justice, that this person is not allowed to kill themselves, that they must suffer for the crime that they did admit or that they were justly convicted to? That all those qualifiers, and again, if you're not fine with those qualifiers, that's okay, but this is the phrasing that we have. Do we as a society value the idea of us getting our retributive justice while this person suffers? Is that a fair summation and analyzation of your point, Doobie?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. That's all I have to we cannot go down, especially if we're going to use the American prison system. Like, we cannot have this conversation if we are pretending that our prison system is perfect, because it fucking ain't.
Right.
Right.
I think people overstate how many issues a prison system has. Like we just saw with Dewey, implying that most prisoners are there because they didn't talk to the cop when they showed over, they said the wrong thing. Most people who are in prison, I think we should acknowledge, are there because they did do the crime, and now they're doing the time, as that the police dog said on that old TV commercial.
Certainly.
McGruff.
Like, even if I
Scrub
say
McGruff,
You're talking a different point there, Doobie, and you're talking about like people that are forced into or are in really hard positions that commit those crimes that wouldn't have committed those crimes if they had other options. May not have.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the point of why we have to hyper fucking analyze and go down this rabbit hole. The question has to be framed in this way, otherwise it becomes very screwy. Can
you repeat that again? So I think it was something like we should take into account people that might not have committed the crimes if the system, or they had like the ability to do something else or whatever, they had other option.
Yeah, I was saying let people get put into hard positions, whether it's economically, whether it's socially, whether they're just raised stupidly or whatever, and they didn't really have a fairer shot at doing stuff, and they do stupid shit and end up in prison.
I don't think you get a life sentence because you just did.
Oh, we're not talking. I'm sorry, I'm not talking life sentence part of it. I'm just talking like anywhere from 2 years and on, where they go into prison.
Yeah. Everybody but me's done dumb shit, so I can acknowledge that.
This is
understand that.
Yeah, this is a hyper specialized question where we're already assuming that guilt is 100% provable, that there is no chance of a rehabilitation, and that they are justly convicted, and that they will suffer through. We have to admit that they will suffer medically through this inevitable until they die sentence. Do we value that sort of rehabilitative? What's the word I'm looking for? Retributive justice. That would have to be the question.
So,
Wick, it's your turn, then me. Yes. And I guess we'll go to maybe Guy, and maybe if you want to say something. And we had Vanilla come in a while ago and Roadman. All right, so Wick first.
Okay, so I just have 3 quick points that I have to go. And I thank you for having me on. The first point I would like to make is that I do not retributive justice is not something I'm generally for. I just don't think it's worth it. I don't think I don't believe that the prison system should be punishing people. I think that ideally it should be a way to segregate people from society until we can rehabilitate them, however long that takes. And I understand that's kind of an idealized goal. That said, I would say that just the fact that you had to make all these caveats in your line of questioning, redheaded man, the fact that you had to hyper focus on this, yes, shows that we are not at a point where talking about allowing assisted suicides to people who are on life on death row or in life in prison is something that is realistic or anything that I would support and
should be engaged in
any way, shape, or form. We have a lot of ways to go, a lot of different ways we tackle the prison system. Second of all, this is okay. So those of you who've watched the conversation tonight, this is why the left is going to lose in the future, is because when I come on and I agree with these points, I say, I'm 100% with you, King of William, 100% with you, Dr. K. I still get called a eugenicist because I didn't say it in the way they fucking wanted. What the fuck? What? This is crazy town here. This is fucking crazy town, and you're going to keep losing. You're going to keep hurting your own side if you keep doing shit like that. Stop it. Stop it, please, for the love of God. And the third thing, Prime, you kicked me off for being a clown. This is your notice. We're coming for you. Clown gang coming, and we're going to bring you to Clown Town, okay? Watch your back.
Clowns get on the list. Clowns get put on the list. All right.
We should extend that criteria.
Clown's gone.
Let's go to Meat, and then was it Guy, and Vanilla, and Robe. Excuse me. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think, man, I'll keep it short because Wick said a lot of my points. I love Big Dick Wick coming out. Always love to see it. But I just want to say, so the reason why I feel like my question still hasn't been answered is because one of the qualifications that Dustin made about, Wick made a very good point about all those qualifications showing how impractical it is. But one of those qualifications is especially impractical because I don't know how we're going to do it today. And that is, I don't even understand what it means. This idea of, we made the distinction of like someone who wants to kill themselves, who is like of sound mind and not like suffering from some severe depression or something.
Right.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Are we under the impression that there are people who want to kill themselves who are like not under some kind of severe distress?
Yes.
They exist.
All right. Well, all right. So if they exist, I am not aware of them, and I guarantee you they are an insanely disproportionate number of people to the point that trying to consider them representatively in this analysis is like just way off, just so off base.
And the problem is because if these people exist within our prison system, we have a duty and responsibility to treat them humanely. Just an example as not comparable, right? But how we deal with people who are trans in the prison system must be accounted for because people who are trans will commit crimes, right?
Sure.
They don't commit crimes because they are trans. They will commit crimes because they are people, right?
However,
so we need to figure out how we deal with them.
Right, but I just want to point out that this distinction that we've made here is not particular to prison. And so all of the arguments that I would make for a general populace and how like the problems you have to solve when you're making a prescription, they still apply to prison. And just because there are an extreme minority of populations in the world that have enabled such a policy, I'm sure I could find all sorts of policies that I and other people here would consider ill-advised all across the world.
No, they don't, Professor Meat. What you're missing is that people are in prison and there for long-term and life sentence, and that's just that part of it that you're missing with this.
I understand the idea, but you haven't represented that actually solves my problem. Like, I understand the idea, but my problem still stands. It doesn't invalidate my issue. It doesn't invalidate all of the research.
Your problem is not phrased correctly to address the question. That's what I would say, Professor Meat, is the question, your question is, your evidence is based upon people who have lived through suicidal attempts vastly, and from my own suicide attempt and from my own experience about learning about suicide, vastly agree that their problems were temporary and that they regret attempting to commit suicide. The issue is not with those people, right? The issue that we have are people with terminally uncurable diseases. So this would put the same, we put these people in this question, we put these people in this, or we would put people that are sentenced with all those qualifiers that I just put out and that are incarcerated without the possibility of the parole. We put them into that same category because the reason why they are depressed is because they are in prison without the possibility of parole, right? That will not change based on our laws in society. And again, this is a rabbit hole of questions. That's completely fine, but they are a separate category from people that attempted suicide and lived to regret it.
They are so they're not separate, they're distinct, they're a subset, and that's the distinction I'm trying to draw, because while they are a distinct subset, I could draw all sorts of distinct subsets. People, there is a reason, generally speaking, that people want to kill themselves. Now, we can identify particular commonalities between certain populations about the nature of those reasons. However, if you're going to try to ask me to believe that there is some difference there that completely solves my issue, you've got to demonstrate that. And so far, all
I have demonstrated that. The demonstration is that there are people of sound mind, quote unquote, that
but
are
you specifically said in your example that's not who we're talking about.
No, I'm not talking about who you're talking about. The demonstration that I made.
Why would you talk about someone other than who I'm talking about?
Because you keep talking and not listening. Because the
I
demonstration.
Think you're not listening to me.
Yeah, I know. Because you're not making sense.
So we can go round and round about it forever. Or we can talk.
So to be clear, the people that you're talking about, Meat, are people who commit suicide or attempt to commit suicide as an impulse decision, which is the majority of people who attempt to commit suicide. You're talking about those people, right?
Sure. Impulse. So if you dig into it, impulse is a little bit of a loaded word, but sure, for the purposes of the conversation, yeah.
Okay. So I think, I understand that's what you're talking about. That's not what we're talking about.
Right. Exactly. But so we all agree. So do we? Who is in disagreement? This is what I'm trying to understand. Who is in disagreement that we should? Are we or are we not in agreement that we're trying to put these people together? The people who are terminally ill and the people who have life in prison without parole and want to die.
I don't think
we're talking about putting those people together or not. Like I'm hearing two different things here.
Yes, but okay, go ahead.
Okay.
No, you go, Doobie.
Okay, but we're saying that within that subcategory of people who are in prison for life, right, and want to commit suicide, we're not saying, hey, we should allow them to impulsively decide to get medically assisted suicide. We're saying that, hey, if they want to do this, we should allow them to go through the process, which takes months, which requires them to be seen by multiple medical professionals, and to ensure that this is the actual decision they want to do, and they need to go through this for months, and they need to reflect on it, and then when it happens, they're questioned again about it, right? So we're saying we should allow them to go through that process, not an impulse decision, a process that takes months and requires them to visit multiple medical professionals to try to convince them out of it.
All right.
So before we go to how, Professor Meat, we want to be clear that we've differentiated between impulsive suicide and people that are terminally ill or life in prison. They're two different things.
So,
and it's not, just to be clear, a physician does not try and talk somebody who's terminally ill out of it. They try and reinforce the idea that this is their decision alone, that they understand the consequences, and that this is something that they are truly and wholeheartedly in. Not try and stop somebody from killing themselves.
Understand
it's a distinction, but it's a difference.
I understand that the prescription is to parse those things out.
Correct.
What I'm saying is, how do you parse? I cannot imagine and have not seen a way. I know there are some minority of people that claim to have a way, but I have not seen a way that seems able to me to be able to successfully parse that stuff out in a way that will not necessarily, in all likelihood, by all best evidence, end up allowing people in those other categories to kill themselves in situations where if we had given them the chance to live, they would not have rather lived.
But so basically you're saying, Professor Meat, that then we should keep people around and punish them and keep them in pain because we can't be 100% sure.
Right.
And that's what I'm disagreeing with.
After they're dead.
Pain, there will always be people with any prescriptive policy that end up suffering in some minority. We have to do the best we can as a society.
And if we allow, let
me finish, I'm almost done. And if we allow the fact that some people, however minor, may be harmed by the policy, we will categorically stop ourselves if we could use the exact same argument categorically to stop ourselves from offering any prescriptive policy, because we will.
That's
always
exactly
go
what
through
you're
that.
doing. Because you're
No,
saying
that's-
because
no.
some of these people might regret the decision. We shouldn't do this. Right?
No,
That's exactly
your
what you're doing.
argument is that because those people exist in a minority, that we shouldn't do it. I am saying that because there is a much greater degree of people who, it seems by all
You
best
don't know
evidence,
that.
by all best evidence, no best guess.
No, not
certainly
by all
seem
best
like they
evidence.
will suffer
The
from
evidence
this.
that you have has nothing to do with medically assisted suicide. It's about impulse
does.
suicides.
Right,
No, it doesn't.
Professor Meat, the evidence you're using is for impulsive suicide,
The evidence
not
that
for
I have
people
is
in
for
severe pain.
suicides. However, your assumption that the clinically assisted suicides are in a separate category when it comes to impulsivity and whether or not it is due to some either short or long-term kind of temporary illness that they could potentially overcome, that is an assumption on your part that Wick's point earlier is that we cannot falsify because of the extremely high rates of success of physician-assisted suicide.
Right, because
So
they
those
got what they
assumptions
wanted.
things are separate, but we can't
We can't
actually
talk to
falsify
dead
that
people.
claim.
No, Professor
yes,
Meat, you're
because
missing the
it's
point.
successful.
Yes,
Professor
exactly.
Meat, you're missing the
Wait,
point
Professor
that we
Meat,
want to
just
reform
listen.
prison.
Professor
Yeah, you
Meat,
want to
just-
reform prison, but I'm saying that by all best evidence, there's going to be negative consequences to that, and you're just saying that, oh well, but there's a little bit. You're okay with harming a whole bunch of people because there's a tiny
No,
little-
no, that's not what they're
That's literally what
saying.
you're saying. That's literally what you're saying.
So Yamato, do a quick thing, and then I want to go to Guy who's been waiting, and then Vanilla, and then Aru.
No, Professor Meat, that's not exactly what he's saying. You're like jumping to conclusions, and like you're not listening.
All right, can you guys stop just telling me that and actually answer my fucking questions or my arguments?
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
I will do my best.
Okay, Yamato, can you do that? Can you say something else? Then I'll go to Guy.
Yeah, you just go to Guy.
Okay, Guy, and then we'll go to fuck, my brain's breaking. Vanilla, and then Robe, and then freaking Johnny Scarlet. But Guy first, please.
Yeah, I feel like we've gotten obfuscated all over the place. Again, to like refocus people that are committed to life in prison. We know that they have committed the crime. They've confessed to the crime. Should they be allowed to take physician-assisted suicide options? Again, I feel like if we don't let them, we're saying you must like endure this torture indefinitely, and we're going to try to keep you around for as long as possible. I think we do need to give them this option. If we have a fear that there's going to be impulsivity and people are going to regret this later on, maybe we can resolve this with like a placebo pill that's going to give someone an extremely serious flu and they think that they're going to die for a minute. And then they come back and go, hey, you know what? You're not dead. Do you want to do this again? We're going to give you the real one this time. And it clears up the impulsivity argument of it. But again,
I'd be interested in exploring that idea.
Sorry, hold on.
At some
Guy,
point, we
please.
need to give people the option to, hey, if you are in this situation, your situation is never going to change and you don't want to be here anymore for it, I don't see any way to say you can't kill yourself without it being cruel. I mean, we can put them through mental health treatments, we can make sure that they're not depressed, that they're not having some sort of a delusional episode at the time when they want to do this. It's going to take months to do, but once they've made it through all the checks, you kind of have to give them the right to check out if they want to.
Okay, so we'll go to Vanilla, Robe, Johnny.
Yeah, so like kind of like along the same lines that Meat was saying. Like, I don't understand. Like, if we take out the caveat of them serving life in prison, I don't see why this wouldn't apply to like just anyone in our society. Like, if anyone goes to a mental health professional and meets all the checks and for 3 months still wants to kill themselves, why should they not be able to? Because it seems like the justification about this bodily autonomy argument shouldn't only apply to prisons. And I don't really agree that it's eugenics, but it seems like we're applying this like negative connotation to these people who are in prison, that they should be able to kill themselves because they're bad enough people, where other people can have the same amount of suffering that won't go away in our normal society, but we wouldn't let them do this thing because you're a prisoner and you have suffering that won't go away, we'll let you kill yourself because you're a bad enough person that we're just okay with that. And just to touch on Meat's point, I think the problem that I see with the way y'all interpreting what he said is that it seems like y'all are assuming that the people who chose to kill themselves are impulse, and those people didn't have long-term suffering, and those people who later figure out that, hey, I tried to kill myself and didn't work, are a different set of people from the people y'all are talking about, and I don't think that they are.
Robe Man, then Johnny.
I think people should be allowed to kill themselves. If you want to kill yourself, go ahead and kill yourself. Um, the real reason I came on this panel is I wanted to talk to Professor Mead. I'm going to be giving you $5 sub. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
But I wanted to talk about Twitch politics in general, and I don't appreciate how the Twitch politics scene, there's a lot of shit talking going on lately. There's been a lot of there's just been a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, a lot of people coming at a lot of people, and I just think that we should all come together and realize that we are all in this together, you know? We're trying to build a community, and when you attack and come at other streamers, it's not good.
Eat my ass,
Bro, man, did you have an intervention or something? Because usually you're the person coming at people. I'm just wondering what happened.
I'm not coming at people usually. Usually when I come on these things, yeah, I'm loud. Yeah, I talk angry. You know, I'm this guy that everybody's mad. But what happens is I do my little fun time, and then I gotta watch a video for 3 hours talking about how I'm an asshole. I'm an asshole.
You're being a beta. Someone said mean things about you. They said you were mean to somebody, and now you're backing down because your spine is made out of fucking noodles. Just tell them to fuck off. Tell them to suck your dick and move on.
Doobie, you have a avatar as your picture. I'm literally, this is the closest you can get to my face. Okay.
Like, what's okay. Whether my face is on the camera or not, you're being a beta. If you give in to these people, tell them to fuck off, eat your ass, suck your dick, whatever your preferred thing is, and move on.
Okay. I understand.
Oh, okay.
But hold on. Before we go, I appreciate everything that you guys have done. People, if they want to kill themselves, go ahead and kill themselves. You look at this face right here. What's going to happen is Twitch politics is changing, baby. It's coming.
Good.
Wow.
Very good.
What an experience. Yeah.
What was the $5 for?
It's me.
He's gonna
it's
give
the sub bet.
Yeah, gonna sub. Yeah. But that was odd, and you've never actually seen Real Man's face. I mean, he always comes up with glasses, but still, thanks for that. All right. Also, more importantly than that, we have fucking Johnny Scarlet here. Oh my God, Johnny Scarlet. I haven't seen them in so long. Like, it's like 8 months, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I haven't been doing panels. It's good to see you, Prime.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Please, say whatever you like. The floor is yours.
Excellent. I'll just treat this like an opening statement. I came on because I am a member of a philosophic society called the Order of the Good Death, which is run by Caitlin Doty, who is also Ask a Mortician on YouTube. And she actually advocates the right to a good death, the right to a comfortable, at peace death that you've talked about with your therapist. If it's something that is like a terminal illness, that's the reason for you doing it. And actually, as far as the prison thing goes, that was what you guys were talking about right when I was coming in. Prison is actually legal lack of bodily autonomy. And it's a lot of people say that prison in America is the last form of legal slavery. And so it's interesting to me that you guys would grant a right to a good death, just like a right to a good life, to someone who's actively getting their bodily autonomy taken away. What I think, if I was to say what the general scope of the advocacy of the Order of the Good Death is, it's for people who are living in suffering because of a terminal illness, and they want to very calmly, peacefully, with all of their friends and family around them, take their time in order to say goodbye. And that's something that is really far from the idea that the people we're punishing by putting in prison would be granted this right first. I'm not saying that people in prison should have their rights taken away. I'm not saying that legal lack of bodily autonomy is a good thing. I'm not in charge of the prison system, though. I'm an advocate for good death.
We did have a conversation about this earlier in the week, and Prime shared an interesting article, I think, out of Norway about a couple that their children were raised and they were nearing the end of their life. And rather than trying to live, you know, if one of the married couple passed away, they didn't want to live alone. They wanted to die together, surrounded by their friends and family beforehand. So again, I think that this is something that we should consider offering to the general public. And again, in prison, I just feel like it makes even more sense because of the financial burden to the society to keep these people alive. And it's torture if they don't want to be there and we're forcing them to be there out of retribution.
That's the thing, though, is that it's. I'm sorry, Prime.
I just wanted to know how far you're expanding this, right? So is this to general public altogether, or like are you limiting it to certain demographics?
Again, I'd say that the general public, just in general. Oh, I'm sorry.
I meant it to Johnny, but anyone can, either of you can say it, doesn't matter.
I think that this is a general public thing, and the reason that I don't think that it would be something that we would immediately advocate for in prisons is because, again, when we put people in prison, when we decide, A, that we are putting them in prison instead of putting them to death, which is a possibility in this country, we are taking away their bodily autonomy. There is not a straightforward path for people who are looking to legally end their lives in prison at all right now. And if you wanted to talk about the logistics of that, I definitely would suggest going through the forums and the structures of letting that be a right for regular American citizens in the first place.
Yeah.
Dustin, please.
I don't, at least on my end, I'm definitely not against physician-assisted suicide. I don't know if that... I'm kind of more familiar with Janet M. Good or kind of like Jack Kevorkian and those lines. This is kind of the first time that I've ever kind of interacted nor heard of the Order of a Good Death. Definitely going to be a read for me, so thank you for popping in. Again, the question is more along the lines of this unending kind of mental depression that seems to be... a legitimate thing within our prison system, within a prison system. Again, all the qualifiers that I threw out earlier, whether or not those people who are labeled as prisoners that are not available to be paroled or rehabilitated have this right. I personally don't think that just because you're a prisoner, even if you're a murderer, that you lose a lot of rights as a prisoner. I still think, and I'm pretty sure I'd be okay with defending this, I still believe you have the right to vote, right? I still believe that you have a right to bodily autonomy, to the best medical services that can be provided. Like, there are a lot of rights that I don't think should be stricken away from people just because they made the mistake. What we cannot do, in the sake of this conversation, I believe, is talk about the mistreatment and the problems that we have within the prison system if we're to fundamentally address this question. That's what I think kind of happens.
So I'm curious because I think, Meat, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're opposed to like assisted suicide in general, right?
Outside of terminally ill cases, yeah.
Yeah. So Johnny, I don't think you would make that distinction, right? So you would say that even people who aren't terminally ill, should have access to this, right?
That is a really interesting question, and it gets into our medical rights as citizens, which is something that's really ill-defined, primarily, I think, because our doctors and our dentists don't go through a lot of federal sanctioned things in order to get most of their credentials. A lot of that is state. A lot of that is... even through the dental system, that's something that you don't even generally go through the state college system for. That's an entirely different college system for a lot of states. So the medical system in America in particular is so weirded out that I would even say, let's start with like the NHS. Let's say, would the NHS be in charge of this in a country that has a healthcare system that makes sense? And my answer to that would be up to the discretion of the doctor, because obviously depression, like I had major depressive disorder for years, and I can tell you that it has a lot of physical symptoms. My joints are achy all the time. I sleep like 10 hours at a time. It's crazy. But at the point where those physical symptoms are so intense that it is no longer depression, that it is something else, that is the case where I would say it would be bad enough to look at something like this, because depression in and of itself is generally not associated with those types of severe physical symptoms. It would largely be something that has compounding issues. And so I would say that in my best estimation, that would be up to a series of physicians. A lot of the same way that we deal with gender transition in a lot of countries, how it's a medical system wherein you go through a series of appointed doctors, and then at the end of all those signatures, you get to say, okay, I'm changing my driver's license. And I know that makes it sound flippant and a little bit like off the cuff, but it's actually a years and years long process that can be very painful for people.
Yeah, I think Doobie posted an example that may be the example that we'd probably use as far as like on the Wikipedia. Frank Van D. Bleeken?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be the example. And I also know, I don't think he used this woman's name, but there was a woman that had suffered several different rapes and sexual assaults that
Yeah, I
was
mentioned her on
granted.
the panel earlier. And
Yeah.
she's in like Norway.
Okay, that was granted physician assisted suicide because of the level of depression that she was experiencing, or what was the label that they kind of put it
I
under?
forgot what the label is, but basically
Okay.
she just couldn't cope with it. She'd gone through like multiple stays of like medical hospitals and shit, multiple psychiatrists and therapists and medication, and it just was not working. So she wanted to go through assisted suicide. So she went
Right.
through the process and they allowed it.
Yep.
Yeah,
It
I
seems
think.
like. Oh no, go ahead, man. I talk a lot.
Oh, yeah, I think I skipped over this. But we were but me brought this up. You all were talking about this group of people that weren't severely depressed, that weren't mentally ill, but just wanted to kill themselves. Like, can
Yeah,
you like describe that group or like some
I
type of case of that?
This guy, Frank Van den Bleeken was his name, right? He was a serial rapist and murderer in Belgium, and he'd served 30 years of his prison sentence. He would be in there for life, and he for 3 years he was trying to get assisted suicide. Right? He saw multiple psychiatrists. They all agreed that he was suffering unbearably from a condition that could not be cured. Right? He couldn't control his sexual urges, right? So he could not be let out, right? And they again, like I said earlier, they approved it initially, and then like a week before, they decided not to go through with it, not to allow him to get like euthanasia, and now he's been in like a psychiatric prison ward for years. So I'm sure he's suffering even more now, because that doesn't sound nice, right? So people like this guy who has no hope of getting out, right? He's been there for fucking decades, and he's advocating for this for years. And he's spoken to all the medical professionals, and they agree that he's not going to be cured, right? I think we should allow these people the option of assisted suicide.
So somebody along the lines of like a pedophile somebody who's pedophilically inclined that cannot control their urges would be able to, in your idea, would be granted a
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. That would make a lot of sense.
So
Okay, so
go ahead, Vanilla, you go first, please.
yeah, so like I'm kind of like along the lines with me. Like, if we're like trying to like do the best case scenario, if we compare that percentage of people to the percentage of people who, for maybe a 2 or 3 year point, would be going through a stage of depression and would maybe come out of this later, is it worth possibly harming that group of people versus giving this small percentage of people who just want to kill themselves because they think they're going to hurt more people later on? Like, should we allow that, or should we do that?
Well, the issue is that so if it was just someone saying that they're depressed and they've been depressed for a long time and now they want assistance killing themselves, I would say no, right? But these are people who, when this happens, they go through a process, right? They need to be eligible, they need to apply for it, they need to speak to multiple physicians, and then they get the approval. And then there's like a waiting period while they people speak to them, make sure they're sure about the decision. And the day that it happens, they get the questions again. Right, so it's not a simple thing.
No, I get that. So why do you want the criteria to be this person has to be sentenced to life in prison? Why do you want that to be one of the criteria?
Because I think if somebody has like, actually, this is interesting. So if it were like a 50-year-old and he has like 40 years in prison, I'd extend it to that guy too.
Well, I mean, but to him, that's still life. Well, what I'm saying is,
Yeah, exactly.
it seems like the reason you want the criteria to be life in prison is because you have this understanding that if this person could get out of prison later, they might feel better. So we don't want to let them kill themselves in prison, right?
Well, to be very
So
clear,
so so what I'm saying is they could pass all the tests, they could pass all the psychological evaluations, and the doctor say, yes, yes, you can kill yourself. But in the back of your mind, you're like, well, I don't want this person to go through this process, because if they only have a 10-year sentence, even though they feel this way right now, in 10 years when they get out of prison, they might not feel this way anymore. So it seems like you're still operating under that thought process of a person could feel this way now and pass all the tests and be allowed to kill themselves, and they could get better later, and you don't want
I
to
think
allow that.
I think the way that I'm imagining this scenario, right? So these are people who are in prison for life, so there's no hope that they're ever going to be free, right? So their mental duress is probably coming from the fact that they're in a cage, surrounded by a bunch of shitty people who've done awful things to other people, and they're going to be in there for the rest of their lives. Right. So those people, I think, are like a separate category from people who are in there temporarily and have some hope of getting out, maybe getting out early for good behavior, whatever the fuck it is. Right. So, but that being said, I think my position on like assisted suicide, I'd allow anybody who goes through this process, right, and sees a psychiatrist and multiple psychiatrists, and this is what they want to do, I'd allow them to do it. Right. I think it makes more sense than somebody speaking to somebody who's gone through this whole fucking process for months, this fucking turmoil, speaking to all these medical professionals, right? And then saying no, and then they go and try to kill themselves on their own, right? Like that seems worse to me. So I'd extend this to everybody in society. But I think in this situation, I'm speaking specifically about people like with life sentences.
So let's go to Johnny, the redolent thought. I'm going to try to represent the other side of this, because people have argued against me so many times. I know their arguments. I'm curious how you all react to that. But Johnny first, redolent, then I'll jump in.
So I do have a bit of a word of caution, and that is for the idea that Doobie just put forward, which is the idea that you could just do this without any sort of extenuating medical or mental circumstances. And that would be the case of drug legality. So I believe it was Venezuela. No, it wasn't Venezuela. I can't remember which one it was, you guys. The country that made every single drug legal in like 2001. Portugal. That's it. Thank you so much. So in Portugal, what happens statistically, and what would probably happen statistically in any region that showed this, because we've repeated it a couple of times since then, is you saw a really big spike in people who said that they had tried certain drugs, and then over time, after about 2 years, you had a really low number of those people returning and saying, yes, I still do XYZ drug. It caused a spike in people attempting to do these things that they had never had the chance to do before. And so what I think would be mirrored here is that you would probably see a few years of people taking advantage of this and trying to go through the process. And after the first few people go through this process, you'll probably see a lot of mourning in the families surrounding it. It'll probably be a reverse issue afterward, because people will probably come forward and say, well, my family member went through this process and it's really been affecting me ever since then. I don't want to do that to anyone else, because that is, of course, the problem that we're talking about, guys. I don't really want this to like escape anybody, that it's not just about this individual person. It's oftentimes, all of the time when something like this happens, it's going to affect everyone around them forever, because that other person isn't here anymore to be affected. So I think the surrounding family members for people who go through this process, if it were to become legal, would start to have backlash about the process, or they would be way less likely to go through the process themselves. And that's less of an argument, and it's just more of a point that I want you guys to think about.
I was going to let redolent thought in, but they had to step away for a second, so I'll jump in. So, my man Eucharist, who I like a lot, and he was here previously, right? We've argued about this, and something he would say is that a society that allows for not just like more suicides, right? In terms of like terminally ill people being allowed to do it, then now prisoners being allowed to do it, but generally a lot of people who do it. It's a society that will have simply more suicides, more deaths, and unnecessary deaths. So there will be a certain population who will just simply take this option when they might have otherwise made it through, struggled, but made it through to the other side of whatever that ails them, right? Are you okay with a society that simply accepts death from these angles? And if it's and how far does it go, right? Like, do you accept someone below 18 having deciding to do this, right? Because a child could have legitimate reasons why they want to kill themselves, right? But oftentimes would say that it would get better, at least wait till adulthood. But why should we hold it back from them? Like, you'll just have more people wanting to die who could have otherwise been, happy, fulfilled individuals if they had just not had that option. It doesn't to anyone who's supporting.
Yeah.
But it seems like, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dewey. You're fine. Go ahead.
Well, I think it seems like you'd also have more people who would try it on their own, do it on their own. It might end up being, because that's not very effective a lot of the time, might end up disfigured or like brain dead for life or something, right? Like, so, so you'd be removing their ability to like Johnny said, to pass with dignity, I think it was, or I forget what the term was.
A death with dignity.
Yeah, to have a death with dignity, right?
Mm-hmm.
With their family surrounding them and everybody fully aware of the decision they're making for themselves, right? And you're shutting these people off to take some pills in a restroom somewhere.
There's a certain percentage of the population. This is like crazy high. I'm sorry, I don't have the number on me. But there's a certain percentage of the population that has like undiagnosed mental health disorder, right?
Correct.
That is causing them some sort of pain, some sort of discomfort, some of them extreme pain. It could be that whatever is ailing them could be treated, but it hurts. It hurts really bad, and decided, you know what, I'm going to take this option. Rather than instead doing the hard work of providing healthcare to mental health care, right? Simply giving them a way out, a quote-unquote good death, would be the wrong way of tackling this, right?
Well, but I think that makes sense if you just allow these people to sign a form somewhere and get like medication to kill themselves. Right? What we're talking about is them as a requirement for having access to that, and a physician is going to be there when it happens. By the way, they need to go through this therapy. They need to speak to psychiatrists and psychologists. They need to make sure that not only is this like something they definitely want to do, but it's not something that could be treated in some other way.
Yeah, I mean, there's also going to be, and I think you were just touching on this, Prime, there's also going to be not just on the mental side, but there are plenty of actual diseases that we try and combat scientifically, but we don't have an answer to right now. Like dementia is going to be one of them. And we as a society have to take this into account. Like, do we continue to allow people to suffer from dementia in hopes of that we do one day find a cure by using them for research, right? Like, the question that I think that I value a little bit more is, if I look at it by the numbers, I think there will be very few people that will take this. I think there will be more people that will actually try a medical solution, that we won't lose as many to solve these problems medically. It's I don't know if anybody will remember this, but this isn't going to be like a Futurama suicide booth. You throw in a quarter and then, hey, you're just fucking gone, right? That's not the process that I think Doobie and I are advocating for. And I would almost willingly, definitely bet that Johnny Scarlett certainly isn't going to say that that's the type of access that she wants either, right? The question And this is going to be a huge medical question for the medical community and the level of ethics that this is going to take. So not only are we going to have to talk about this politically, but then we're going to have to talk about that in a scientific manner too, and in an ethical manner, right? Like, are we ethically okay with admitting that we cannot solve this disease, therefore people are able to take this option? I can't see a reason why, either on a statistical level, that most people, I don't think a lot of people are going to be in this situation, even from a non-prison standpoint, right? Even if we just throw that out the window about the new add-on that we're trying to tag into this category, I don't see that being the case. But I do see it being the case that people have that right, like Johnny Scarlett was talking about, to choose how they die, to be around their family members and allow their family members to remember them in the way that they choose to leave.
Yeah, this is going to be more of an aesthetic thing, and I mean that in like the Kantian sense, like judgment. This is going to be more of a thing where it's not going to be based on a legal technicality. This is exactly what you're able to do with your body. It's going to be based on the judgment and the good sense of our physicians and the people who are in charge of making this sort of stuff happen.
I'd like to say hello to Stardust real quick and hope that you have a lot of jokes for us from now on.
I haven't seen my dad's
Hi,
dick, by the way.
Well, look. I'm not always joking.
Come on, you've seen your dad's dick.
I sometimes
I
am
have
very
not.
serious. Okay, so
Provide evidence.
Liar.
it can always be jokes. Jeez, I'm not your monkey.
I'll be right back.
Oh boy. So I want to give a redolent thought opportunity. Have you caught up?
Yeah. Yeah, I caught up. Yeah, redhead man's gonna go take a look at some dad dick pics on it. No, so something that that he actually touched on a little bit, which Doobie sort of just kind of like skirted by when he said, like, if they pass all of the mental tests, and then we approve that they can, be like kill themselves. The idea of the people who are in prison passing tests that we've devised so that we can approve of them killing themselves when we can't even figure out the problem with the systems that we've created to keep people in prison over and over again seems to be a problem. Like, that seems to be a little bit of a problem, right? Like, the system of...
No, actually.
I know you're going to say no, Doobie, obviously. Like, just shut up for a bit, Frog. The problem is the systems that we keep people in prison for, we have studies that show racism targeting minorities, discrepancies between, like, white people in this country, minorities in this country, longer sentences. We have studies that show that longer sentences mean that people go back to prison afterwards. So we're not actually doing a good job of rehabilitating people. So how can we actually judge people being put in charge of prisons to go, yeah, they said that they were, like, cool with killing themselves, and we're very fine with that. So, like, go ahead and do it. Like, at the same time, I actually am all for, killing yourself if you feel like it is your time to go. So there's a little back and forth there. I also think, I'm against capital punishment, but if there's 100% irrefutable evidence, I'm totally fine with a 22 in the back of the head for someone in the back. We don't have to keep them alive. Like, I have, like, a mixed view of, like, I see this side, but I'm just worried about the systems in place with these tests that you just kind of said in a, like, passing sentence. So, like, oh, if they pass tests that say, like, it's okay to kill themselves, it's fine. But, like, the people who are in power right now, we can't really trust their ability to give accurate tests, I guess.
Fair test.
Why couldn't you apply all of that to the healthcare system and racism that you can find and discrimination you can find when mental health professionals and, like, doctors, like medical doctors are treating minority people, right? Like Black women especially, right? Their pain tends to be taken much less seriously than white women, right?
Yeah, do you know why?
Wait, hold on. So why, if you can apply those, if you can apply those kind of,
do you know why before you continue extrapolating?
Tell me why. Tell me why.
Do you want to go back to the 19th century, the father of gynecology? Do you know anything about that?
Can you just make the statement?
Oh, you don't? Okay, cool. Just keep going then with your bullshit.
No, just Okay, just tell us why it seems like it's implying that it makes sense for them to take the pain of black women less seriously. Like I'm saying,
No,
hey,
I'm saying, do you understand why the medical people take black women's pain and black people in general? Do you know the history behind that? Can you answer that, or are you just going to bullshit your way through it?
probably has to do with some what's the word I'm looking for? Racialism, some phrenology shit, right? Some nonsense like that.
Before
I'm saying this
phrenology,
is a
actually.
okay. So I'm saying this is a bad thing. This is like
It is
racial
sure.
discrimination, right? So like yeah. So I don't know why. What do you think I
checking
was
you to make
implying?
sure you don't just like pivot on some dumb bullshit and like.
I don't think I'm
normal
pivoting on
stuff.
anything.
What
I was acknowledging that there's
keep going.
there's
I'll
like
correct you as you go.
racism issues within the medical system. Like
No
obviously.
shit.
Okay, well, if you agree with me, I don't know why you interrupted. Okay, so given that we know that we both agree that that's the case, right? Why wouldn't you apply the standard to that system and say, hey, how can we trust this system that is full of racism, that has all these issues when it interacts with minorities, that can't cover or treat everybody in this country, and that is run with like a profit motive and yada yada? How could we trust this system to determine that somebody can go through the requirements for like a assisted suicide in like current day, right? It seems like if that's your position on the prison system, we can't trust the system at all because there are issues. Those similar issues
No, that's
exist
it.
in the medical
That's
system.
it. That's your
Similar
your
issues
fucking stupid
exist in the
demagoguing bullshit
similar
pivot right
issues
there.
exist
That's
in the medical
exactly it.
system. So why wouldn't you say that we shouldn't have assisted suicide at all?
So you're saying that we shouldn't, because I agree with you that I can't question expertise on a different thing. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I'm asking why you're not applying that standard to the other system that also has race problems.
Okay, so the reason why you can't, the reason you can question right now, if we come up with a system for the people who put prisons into place, the system that was creating all of these prisons, which by the way skyrocketed during the 70s with Nixon. He did it intentionally to, like, before we had a crime rate spike. He made the crime rate spike after he said, hey, let's build a lot of prisons, guys. Then the crime rate spike happened. The reason we have so many prisons is a racist system. So putting people who still are in these positions of power into a thing where we give them tests to see if like prisoners can kill themselves based on the vagary of mental health is just a weird thing for you to try to be fighting for.
Not what we were saying. Prisons wouldn't be in charge of this, babe. It would be like medical professionals, right?
Johnny, this is more about Redolent kind of addressing Doobie as a whole. He already kind of acknowledged the qualifiers that I had put in.
I got
Redolent,
you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't flippant acknowledging of these qualifiers and stuff. It was a very thoughtful approach for it that Redbird laid out as well too.
I think Redolent's kind of doing something a little more directly addressed towards Doobie than he is the subject.
But still,
I don't see how that's the case. I mean, yeah, I know that he's addressing me directly. I can see that he's addressing me directly, but it seems like he's implying, right, that because there are like race issues within the justice system of the United States, right, we shouldn't trust this system at all to make these determinations or to provide access to provide these prisoners access to other people who would make these determinations. I don't think that that's a good argument, but given that I'm not the only person on this panel who thinks that this should be an option for prisoners, right? It seems like he's not just addressing me; he's addressing you too.
I'm not saying it should not be an option. I'm saying that when you just say flippantly, the test, when you go, if they pass the test, you just made a very quick flippant, like that's the main thing you were trying to say.
That's because we talked about it deeply earlier.
Yeah, I was talking about this being a process that takes months and requires multiple. First off, it requires like a written request for the application, and it requires multiple visits with psychiatrists and therapists and whatnot. Right, so like we're not, and this takes months. Like I don't think we're being flippant about this.
Okay, so this is why I asked, like, do you know the reason for when you tried calling me out for like, black women's pain levels, and I said, do you know where that comes from? Like, when you say like, oh, I'm sure like the system, I'm just asking with your opinions, the way that you've gotten to the opinion that you hold now, do you understand the levels of where these things come from, or are you just kind of like starting with an endpoint and trying to work your way backwards?
So again, I said I don't know specifically the doctor that you're talking about, right? But I'm sure, right, based on where this shit usually comes from, the issue of like black women's pain not being taken as seriously as white women's pain probably comes from some racialism phrenology bullshit, right? It's
Before that.
racism. Sure, okay. So, but this is like racial discrimination within, or racism within the medical system, within the medical practices, right? I don't know why. Did you think that I don't think that? Like, I don't. Did you think that I actually think black women don't feel pain the same
No,
way?
I'm trying to get to the actual like factual point of it, so you can't give some like.
Can
your
you
regular
tell me?
bullshit
Because I'm
pivot.
actually curious where that came from.
Yeah,
I have no fucking
it's
clue.
taking way too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's taking way too long for you guys to get to the point.
Yeah.
I keep seeing you guys. This has been going for like 7 minutes at least now between the two of you. So which point are you? Both of you can just state your point. That would be much better than the rest of us like trying to guess what the fuck this inner drama is going on. So
I actually don't know what it is. I feel like my position is the same as it's been this entire time, right? So people generally should have access to this, I think. But I think especially people who have life sentences, right, who have no hope of getting out of prison, should have the ability to apply for like physician-assisted suicide and to go through that process, right? That's what I've been saying this entire time.
Yeah, Redolent seems to have something on his mind, and I would just like to get to the bottom of it, so we don't have to like keep guessing, because it it comes off as like, okay, then do it, because I'm tired of like watching you guys dance around each other. I'm sorry, it's just like I feel like there should have been a conversation here by now. So.
Okay. No, I'm just trying to cut to like prevent the usual doobie pivots where he just splices something in half and takes like half of your agreement and rolls with like.
What pivot? What do you think I was pivoting to by bringing up the fact that doctors don't that a lot of doctors don't treat black women's pain the same?
Redolent's about to say
Being
something.
silly.
Let's see. He'll drop the bomb or whatever it is. So.
Okay, so hey, every woman in chat, did you know that the father of gynecology that like doctors today still base their practice on, Dr. J. Marion Sims, mid 19th century, the father of modern gynecology. He performed horrific surgeries on black women without anesthesia, and the whole point was to prove things that they'd already done with men, where they said, like with the slave John Brown, not the white John Brown. Black John Brown got burned alive over fire pits. He had blistered skins. The whole point was all of these pseudo doctors in the 19th century in southern states, who we still have, like one of them is still in the Hall of Fame. The guy who burned John Brown alive is still in the Hall of Fame. His whole thing was to prove that black people have thicker skin and don't really feel pain. And we still have a disgusting number of medical students who graduate today. Almost 1/3 of them actually still believe these fake studies from the 19th century.
Okay, then I'll ask you a question. I'll ask you the question again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Given that there is this history of racism within the medical field, how can you be comfortable, right, with these people making determinations as to whether or not somebody can go through like assisted suicide?
So that's what I'm saying. It sounded like you were saying in prison you want people to be able to just like, we're going to pass tests and we're just going to make it happen. I just want to know. Like,
no, that's not what I've been saying at all.
Who are we going to run these by for people to allow them to? We've diagnosed like mental health. Like, yes, you are past the point of no return. You want to kill yourself, and we're going to sign off on that.
I feel like I've been very clear about that. That's been what I've been saying this entire time.
I
think you've got the Doobie's evil song running in your head, and you were looking for something to like catch me on. But
you'd like an answer, like
Red. We're not talking about just medical people doing it as well too. It's also like therapists as well too, checking in on it.
Yeah, I think Redolent has a very salient point that should be spoken about, as far as like I think Doobie tried to address it, but doesn't seem sufficient for him. Is, are we going to ensure that there is no racial bias that infects the medical system as well as the prison system? And if these two are to meet, what is the contingency plan in order to do that?
That's yes.
Just to talk about it beforehand. So like one of the other problems would be like what I said before, like people in the surrounding areas of this person being very greatly affected. That would have to be put into the system to make sure that people around this person who's seeking this treatment would know about the treatment beforehand. It wouldn't just turn up one day like, hey, your family member kind of did this thing to themselves. Thanks. it would be more of a judgment sort of like wheel. It would be almost this person in the middle, and then all of the spokes are the different supporting structures that would say, hey, this is one of the reasons. This is one of the doctors who supports their decision. This is one of the reasons. This is one of the doctors who supports their decision. It's just like the trans issue wherein you have to go through all of these different health professionals and therapists and social workers in order to get any sort of gender reassignment surgery or oftentimes markers on your documents. Like, this is something, to be fair, Redolent, this is something that I spoke about when I came into the chat, and I think you had just left or something. But this is something that the Order of the Good Death advocates.
Yeah.
No racial components allowed in physician-assisted suicide for prisoners.
Well, the racial component, just like the component, and this is something I wanted to touch on earlier, is the profit component. We would have to ensure that this is not something that would be used for profits or used for, in the case of these extreme diseases, to save profits for insurance companies or anything like that. All of those would have to be, and those are very subjective almost statements to make, but they would have to be codified into a series of audits that would then go through every 6 months or a year for each one of these companies and each one of these physicians involved. Auditing is a huge part of this type of medical process.
So would you say that, and then I want to ask this, then I'll go straight to you, Vanilla. So would you say that we would, to better ensure this, we'd have to have like a Medicare for all system? We'd have to decouple profit, the profit from the medical system altogether, or else we can introduce this perverse incentives, not just here, but fucking everywhere else it already is.
I would even say that, to go further, Prime, I would say the pharmaceutical industry is really the big fish here, because this is what medical assisted suicide generally is an injection. And so we would have to ensure that the chemical that's involved in the injection is not something that these pharmaceutical companies are making money on.
Okay. Let's go to Vanilla. And if Stardust has anything she wants to say.
And that's really a good point too, because we're talking about such little times that it's used. They wouldn't even need to make a profit on that. Sorry for jumping in.
No problem. Vanilla, and then Stardust if she wants to say something.
Yeah, like I mean, if we look at the medical system, we can see all the areas where we see this racial bias and like other types of biases, and we see this in the prison system also. So if we put these two things together, to say that we wouldn't see that, or to say that, oh, we could solve it and we could filter it out. Well, if we could, then we should be able to filter it out before we get to that stage. And the fact that we still haven't been able to, seems like we would still have this same problem occur in this suicide area. I don't see any evidence that it wouldn't, or that you would be able to solve that problem.
So are you like implying, because it seems like when people say stuff like that, the implication that I get is that they believe that like there are just like tons of black and brown people in the U.S. prison system that are innocent, right? And especially that are like, since we're talking about people with life sentences, that are there for life sentences, right, who are innocent, right? And I just don't think that's a big number at all.
No, I
feel like when you speak about it like that, you're kind of exaggerating that issue.
Do you know the number, just out of curiosity?
So
Like, how
yeah,
much-
they're actually estimations of this, and they say that right now people currently the one that I know is about death row. So death row inmates. The number of people that they're estimating are innocent are like 4% of current inmates, and this is including people who've been there since like the 70s and shit, when we had like much worse, capability to like get forensic data and whatnot to figure out if they're innocent.
Right.
And the people that are in there, they're having their cases run through modern processes to make sure that they're actually guilty.
But you would freely and fairly admit that since we are expanding this category to allow physician-assisted suicide to people that are I'm so sorry. This is the same thing I kept talking about. In prison without the life in prison without the possibility of parole. That you would agree that number would be greater. Therefore, the possibility of innocence being greater would probably be higher.
Sure, but this is why when I said earlier that one of my
The
requirements,
admittance
right,
of guilt.
exactly.
Okay.
So one of my requirements, if I were like in charge of this, would be that they would not they couldn't be somebody who's saying that they're innocent and making appeals. They would need to admit that they would need to say, hey, I'm guilty of this crime. Right? I'm no longer.
And
gonna
it would
commit
be an
the-"
admittance of guilt. Would it have to be both? Like admittance of guilt before you got into
But
prison?
this doesn't matter. This
of the
doesn't
crime?
matter.
Well,
If
well,
this
I
person
think-
wants, if this person wants to kill themselves, and that's the condition, then they're just going to say, "Yes, I did it," because they want to kill themselves. Like if they want to go through
Well,
this process,
and that would go to the point of my question, right? Like, okay, I admit that I finally killed it because there's no possible way I'm getting out of here, right? Like, would you make the qualifier they have to admit guilt at sentencing?
No.
Or no?
No,
You
I wouldn't.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So
Go ahead.
then you would have the problem of people
Yeah,
saying,
I just think that that's such a small problem that it's not worth throwing out the entire
okay.
problem.
But you do agree the number would be higher than the current.
It'd be more than
number
zero.
of innocent. Okay, the number of innocents would probably be higher because the standard of proof for the death penalty is so much. The difference in between those two is so much lower. So you would admit that it would be higher than 5%.
I don't know if it's a case that people who are like in prison for life without the possibility of parole, like if I don't know if like that, if you're getting like sentenced for that, I don't think it's that much like
I guess
lower than like a death penalty.
I guess
because in some states that is the maximum, right?
Right. Yeah. Sure. I guess I would just kind of be going purely off the numbers idea. Like there are probably more people that are convicted with that type of sentence than there are the death sentence. Therefore, the number would have to be higher. Would you disagree with that idea?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't disagree. I would agree with it. Yeah.
So there would possibly be more innocent people choosing suicide in this case,
Possibly,
if we agree with
but again,
those
when you look at that 4% number for people on death row, that's
Sure.
all people on death row. So some people have been there since the 70s.
Yep,
Right. So
I
I think going forward, that number is going to be much smaller.
Let's go to Stardust.
I would hope so.
I don't have anything to say. Sorry. Whatever I had to say, I don't have it anymore. So I'll think on it. So.
Did Meat or any of the others have?
I can. I mean, I can say something, but like I didn't want to say it because it kind of felt like everyone wanted to go in a different direction. So I guess feel free to ignore me, but I feel like my question really never got addressed. It doesn't seem to me like anyone's provided me with an act. Like everyone has, in theory, provided me with a solution to my question, but it doesn't seem to me like there's any way to practically fulfill that theoretical kind of solution in practicality. I have not seen a metric that it will
What was the question?
that successfully in
Well, hold
the
on.
useful practicality, unless we're just talking about determining.
Ask the question again. Ask the question. Ask the
Okay, what's the question?
So, let me ask. Yeah, if we can concede, and it's a two-parter now because we've added a little bit of, we've sort of made it two questions now. The first question, the first time I phrased it, it was if we can concede that there's most people who want to kill themselves, and maybe it's slightly different among certain populations, for example, a prison population, but without that data, I'm not just going to assume the nature of that distinction, right? So, given what we know about suicides, it seems that a vast majority of people, as far as we can tell, would prefer not to commit suicide throughout their lifetime, even if there were certain times where they did want to commit suicide. That being said, the first part of the question is, how are you going to actually, like, in practicality, fulfill this like theoretical parsing system with psychiatrists in a way that actually successfully distinguishes those people to a high degree of accuracy that would be necessary to prevent all that harm? And also, well, yeah, that's all the thing, because I just want to say, I'll just add to this argument. That's the whole question, but I just want to add this argument of like, oh, well, there's this population that would be suffering we would basically be telling they have to live. Yes, there is no prescriptive policy that has ever been put in place in all of existence that did not cause some suffering to some population as a result. That we just live in an imperfect world. However, we have to do the best we can to help people. And if our prescriptive policy helps a little bit of people and hurts a lot of people, might not be a good idea.
Okay, so the idea is to do what our justice system, and this is not a great, I guess, qualifier for the argument, because we're talking about the American justice system. However, what I will say is that the idea behind innocent until proven guilty is not actually as simple as that. What it actually is meant to be, in all of the legal scholarship that I've done and in my internships and stuff like that, has been, the idea is really it's okay to let a few guilty people go as long as no innocent people go to prison. Now, we don't really have a system that follows that, just like we don't really have a super democratic system that follows the wishes of the people. And that's a problem with America in general. But if we're talking about systems, if we're going to take away systems and we're going to talk, if we're going to take away America and we're going to talk about systems in general, the system would need to be set up so that, yes, a few people would not get the treatment or the assisted suicide that they wanted, but that no one who would eventually have in an alternate timeline regrets about it. You know, basically the question you're asking is, would people be suffering unduly and dying unduly? And so the answer is to say, to make it so difficult, to make it such a long, arduous process, just like the transgender arguments, make it such a long, arduous process that no one eventually gets to a point where they are dying unduly, and we leave a few people out of that who would like to get that treatment. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, nobody.
I see what you're saying, but I think that there's actually a slight distinction there in how it parses out.
Okay.
Because so in terms of like sort of percentage distributions, I think that you're pretty spot on. But I think that it's the evaluation of the meaning of those margins, because so in that sort of minor margin in the way that we parse that out in transgender communities, I feel like what that translates to is this minor degree of people who we may like unsuccessfully, let's say, or inaccurately diagnose or prescribe in some treatment for gender dysphoria or something like that, right? That's who you're talking about in that scenario. Now, when I look at that harm, that is a potential harm, and for all the reasons that you have stated, in my opinion, you have probably narrowed down really, really, really severely, and in a way that is probably a little more effective with transgenderism, in my opinion, because of the natures of it. We don't have to. That's a really complicated discussion. We'll get too into it, but. Yeah. I think that you've clearly demonstrated those statistics, and I think it's equivalent, but where I think it's different is that in the case of suicide, that tiny population is actually the people we're trying to address. And on the other side, the big population in this case is the people who are going to be harmed if we give a prescription. Now, in theory, yeah, I totally agree with you. Like in theory, in the abstract, that's my point. So we all agree that if we could do that successfully, if we could parse all those things out really well, it would be great. And now we can't do it perfectly, but the thing is in the case, the reason that's okay in the case of transgenderism is because we're not it's the tiny population that is going to get the harm, and the harm is not nearly as severe, and it's good overall. It's a similar kind of thing in this case where it's a flip side in this case where the tiny population is the ones who might be helped, as far as I can tell, as opposed to the big population we might be doing harm to, unless we can successfully fulfill your requirements. However, that doesn't seem. I need to see evidence because of the huge risk of harm in this case. I need to see pretty good evidence that we're going to be able to like break all other evidence about how this is going to parse out. I just don't see that in terms of the particulars of a prescription.
Yes, and I'm so sorry, 1 second, and then I'll let you guys get to your next points. But one thing that I will say about this is that especially in things like the Order of the Good Death and that philosophic society, it's generally not advocated by itself. This is something that is generally advocated in tandem with the rights of people to cheap and free burials, the rights of people to not have to be forced into things like putting formaldehyde in their loved ones' bodies, things that should not seem like they are required. It shouldn't be required for you to fork out $10,000 as soon as a family member dies just because the only local place that will take them wants to embalm them, wants you to get a casket, wants to do all of these things. Order of the Good Death advocates not only for a physically good death, that's true, but generally in the legislation that they put forward, there's a lot of other good that's coming with death-style legislation. And so I think this is actually one of the fringe topics. One of the bigger topics is usually in the death sphere is usually how to talk to your family members about this kind of thing, how to prepare them, and also how to avoid unnecessary expenses that are generally forced upon you by local and corporate death industries.
I think it's interesting that it's a fringe topic. Doobie, I see your hand up. I think it's interesting that it's a fringe topic. Even though it like received national attention just for like a little bit, right? Under the Obama administration for Obamacare, right? Including end of life services. there in those discussions. That was going to be an interesting part. But then, you know, the Republicans got their hands on it, started calling it death panels, right? And it was just this. It was just exactly what Johnny was talking about. Having those conversations. Hey, how long do you want to live, and how long do you want your life to be extended, right? Because if you extend it to a certain point, then you're going to be on a lot of drugs, and maybe you will have to get some sort of medical intervention, maybe machines, and you can do that if you want, sure, and we'll support you. But you may not want that for yourself. So, like, talking about dying like that, and then, you know, once you do die, like, what does that actually look like for your family? Why is it so expensive? How
does it harm our environment?
Yeah. Exactly. That's another one. That's a good one. But like preparing family members for the process of haggling with funeral homes, right? Because like, you're not prepared for that, and they know that. You know, you're in a emotionally vulnerable state, and capitalism doesn't end because your life just ended. So all those things are should be talked about, and it's hard to hear you say, Johnny, and you're correct, that this is a fringe topic, because we don't discuss this in this country at all. And or even there's another one. There was a funeral home that was trying to update how we do funerals in general, within the context of the pandemic, right? Like providing digital services and all that stuff, right? Because why not? So none of this is discussed. So anyway, DB, you want to say something?
I was just going to say that I'm going to head out for the night. So it's nice talking to all of you. Johnny, it's great seeing you again. Stardust, fuck you. Talk to the rest of you later.
Lynn.
Good talking to you, DB.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Also, hello, Star.
Hi. I'm very pro elective death if somebody chooses that. Not just in the life in prison scenario. I do think that, like, with enough preconditions, with like doctors and family members being made aware, I might not be against somebody choosing when they want to go, basically. So very controversial opinion of mine. So
yeah, I mean, I agree with it in the abstract. I think that, like, and here's my thing, is I feel like it's a worthy goal to try and make possible without it's similar to how my views on prostitution is. It's like, for example, to analogize it, like, I think if we could legalize prostitution, everyone could do what they want in a way that nobody got hurt, it'd be great. But there's arguments to be made that maybe we can't practically legalize it in a way that's not going to hurt people, and that's how I feel about this. Right, exactly, and that's how I feel about this argument, very similarly.
Yeah.
But that's equally as ridiculous, though. Like the fact that, I mean, no industry hurts no one, right? There's no industry that has a perfect track record of not injuring anyone.
Right.
So
well, that's why I would say that we don't make a categorical argument, because of that, we just do a cost-benefit analysis, is basically how I look at it. And it seems to me like, while I actually am going back and forth on the fence right now with my prostitution takes, actually, I have some further research to do. That's my sort of analysis.
Talk to prostitutes. Go ahead.
If that's what it takes, in the name of science, for the good people here in the PrimeCayes community, I will do it. But that being said,
you don't want a cost-benefit analysis of civil rights.
Yeah.
Correct? That becomes problematic.
Well, a cost-benefit. Here's the thing: is civil rights are justified by their cost-benefit analysis of how they parse out in society. So if you don't let me go into a cost-benefit analysis in the name of civil rights, I don't know what we're talking about.
Vanilla, what are you gonna say?
Oh no, I just said, like, why wouldn't you do a cost benefit analysis? And Meek just said what I was going to say.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that because it's not everybody's going to agree on the cost and the benefit of black people being able to vote. Right? Like, we don't want the cost benefit.
No, everyone's not going to agree, but that's why we have allowed them to vote, because the majority agree that it will be a better benefit to our society if black people were allowed to vote.
Yeah, and the point of civil rights is to sit there and say that just because the majority does not agree does not negate the fact that these people have this right.
You have right to free speech, even if it pisses people off.
Exactly. No, but the cost benefit analysis is giving that right in the first place.
No, it's
not necessarily.
It's
like
not
every
reinforced because. Go ahead, Johnny.
I'm sorry. Every civil right that has happened like voting on a civil right is not something that every single American does, and we don't have a process that is streamlined for that at all. In fact, I would say that our country and the state of modern countries is so very young that we have no idea whether social and then legal change is the correct pathway for things like this, or if it's legal to lead to social change. And this leads into another thing. America has a huge branding problem with anything that it wants to do, with encouraging families to be better integrated in their communities, with encouraging people to have better schools and to support other families. Like,
what do you mean by branding? If you don't mind elaborating
branding,
a little
well,
bit. Yeah.
You could call it propaganda, or you could call it the message of how we want people to improve their lives. Like, there are a lot of people who don't know the scope of the services that are available for free for certain tax brackets for American citizens. And we don't have the advertising in America, especially in poorer states like Louisiana. We don't have the branding or the advertising or just the outreach capabilities to let people know that ways to improve their lives are available for free, oftentimes through the state and through the government.
And that's intentional because sometimes they don't allocate the correct amount of resources. So they say,
True.
hey, we're going to be forced to do this process, but we ain't going to fucking tell people about it because then we don't have to spend as much money.
Yeah, it's a messaging problem. It's just basically like, if you want to have a country that has flourishing local communities and encourages people to get down in the dirt and grow their own food and have, you know, a really holistic, like, beautiful society that doesn't entirely depend on fossil fuels, like, these are all things that would have to be sent as messages and not as products. And America likes products. America likes physical things that we can produce and then say, this is our thing. And that's one of our biggest problems, in my opinion, is that we don't produce ideas the same way that we produce products.
So would you say, okay, so are you saying that a regime to institute death, right? To this not death, not sorry. Try it again. To allow for assisted suicide, right? That if we did it in America as it stands, it would be branded as some sort of product rather than some sort of holistic service. Is that where you're going? Or maybe I've missed it.
There's some, I think I know what she's talking about. There's sometimes flyers for services that, like, people can get through the government, you know, like just something as basic as that, right? Should probably be more distributed. So I've seen it where they'll have like a flyer for like maybe like benefits you can get through a certain program, or like a brochure for benefits you can get through another thing, or like childcare stuff, or even just like counseling, right? And so I think I know what Johnny is saying. Just basically making that more available to a wider group.
So advertise. You're saying advertise.
Yeah.
Well, this kind of goes back to like
sort of that.
Jack. It kind of, and maybe Johnny, you could kind of reinforce this for me or clean up after me if I fuck it up. But this goes back to like Jack Kevorkian's idea of like, you wouldn't charge for this service, right? It would be unjust. It would be completely unethical to charge for this because eventually, you're going to have huge spikes in services. You're going to have a very large detriment either one way or the other, right? Like maybe it seems like the poor overuse this service and are ending their lives too soon because they believe that they're poor, or that the cost of actually doing this through the legal channels of taxation or however we would process this in a legal sense, how we would handle it would become, the red tape would become so atrocious that only the rich could afford these services, right? Like talking about this becomes problematic in a way of and unfortunately I think Jack Kevorkian was the wrong fucking messenger for it, but had the right idea that these problems, this is a civil right, because no matter who you are, you have that right to it, no matter your stage or where you're at.
Or maybe create an industry, or create a class of people who are invested in a lack of mental health care for the population, because then that creates more customers for them to sell assisted suicide to.
Exactly.
I not even thought of that as a possibility, but yes, Prime, in our current society in America, I think that's definitely a horrific possibility for the future for this type of legislation. And I just want to clear up what I mean when I say messaging and advertising and these ideas. I mean an attitude. I mean an attitude of openness, and a microcosm of that is having the openness and the love with your family to talk about death and to talk about the possibility of dying. As an overall society, we have community conversations we need to have, like, this park needs to be cleaned up, how are we going to pay for it? These are the kinds of things that a very long time ago people would have been having conversations in their villages about this, and actually not that long ago. And now we live in these metropolises wherein everything is put through the government, everything is very streamlined. But the problem, and I can tell you this myself because I got on Medicaid and I discovered how much was available to me, the problem is that the red tape is such that you don't even know there's red tape there. You don't know the help is there. And then all of a sudden you walk into the clinic that's on the absolute weirdest side of town that you could possibly imagine, because that's where the cheapest land was for the state to put it. And you realize, oh, they have flyers everywhere for free workout times and free food at this 2 days a week and stuff like that. And it's just, you don't even realize that those resources are there. And so the communication that comes with those resources and the ability of family members to say, hey, Uncle Joe, it's okay to get on food stamps. It's not something that you have to be like ashamed of or anything. You don't have to stay on them forever. Those are the sorts of conversations that Americans, I think, largely don't know how to have. And that's an attitude thing.
Johnny, you were saying when you came in, you talked about the Order of the Good Death. I don't think Stardust's audience actually got to hear about that. So I want to make sure that they, because it's actually interesting. I went to that website and it's actually pretty interesting. So you want to introduce that again?
I would love that, and I'm super glad that Stardust is here too. By the way, I didn't get to say hey to you or anything, but. But yeah, the Order of the Good Death is run by a few people, but one of them is Caitlin Doty. She's also known as Ask a Mortician on YouTube. And
okay.
Yeah, she is a fabulous content creator, very funny, very sweet and smart, but she also runs this philosophic society that not only has resources to teach you how to talk to your family about death, deal with pet death, deal with planning for death for yourself, but also it advocates for legislation such as the ability to have assisted suicide, but also more largely the ability of people to not be tricked by corporate funeral homes into thinking that they, for instance, have to pay $5,000 to be embalmed when that's absolutely not something you have to have in order to be buried. And it's also very detrimental to our environment. So it's an eco-friendly philosophic society as well.
Oh wow, this is really cool. I just looked it up.
Yeah.
The link is in my chat, guys. You want to check it out. It seems like an interesting site. I took a look at that site. But
I have a short thing.
Go ahead.
So earlier, Professor Mead talked about doing cost-benefit analysis, and maybe it related to prostitution or something. And I would just like to share that, generally speaking, the cost-benefit analysis usually comes out in favor of more fair, responsible, open discussion, more opportunity for people, more people to have better jobs or different jobs, and those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, all of those conversations are very important, and again, America has this problem with emotional openness among people. You know that saying that every poor American is an embarrassed millionaire? I feel like that, yeah,
Temporarily
that,
embarrassed millionaire. Yeah.
A
yes.
temporary millionaire, I think is the term.
Temporary
Like a
embarrassed.
temporarily embarrassed. Yeah. I think that attitude is really pervasive in our country, especially among people that I grew up with who have to, you know, we're from a place where you have to support yourself or literally live on the street. There's no, like, in the village I come from, there is no free clinic. There is no anything for probably 100 miles. And like, this shit is just not widely available to anybody. And so you grow up with this idea that you can't talk about your problems because there's no one to solve them anyway.
Okay. Oh, so here's a question. Because Eucharist, was it Eucharist who asked me this? Maybe someone else did. About when we were talking about death like that. Would you have billboards advertising? So you're saying that we should have the government, like, you know, let us know about what the service is offering, right? Okay. Then would you have billboards that advertise this?
So I'll try to keep this really short, but the way that we advertise things is really changing and it's getting very personal. And I would say that one of the dark triad side of this is BetterHelp asking for your subscription money through your favorite YouTuber. The light side, the idea that this could be free through the government or something, is like having social media accounts where someone who's a social worker or someone who's an expert in this field would go live with a panelist and you could ask questions live and they would be giving information. And I would geofence it. I would say, you know, go on Facebook Live and have them geofence something so that everyone in this area gets a notification that the health center is going live, that your local power company is going live if that's something that eventually is not corporate anymore. Like, I would geofence the shit out of that and use the ability of people to talk to one another through the screen, just like we're doing right now, in order to make the government better and make our services better.
But you didn't answer the question.
But would we have
I have an
billboards?
answer.
Maybe two. I don't know.
No, so
I have
so
a
you
thought.
would.
I have a thought.
One second. I just want to get Johnny on this. So you're saying that you would have a billboard, and it doesn't have to be for profit, right? It doesn't have to be a for-profit company, but like the government advertising, hey, is life getting too hard for you, right? We have services to help you end that. Would you have that, making sure people know this is available, guys? This is available. We have commercials on TV with that.
No. If anything, you need to advertise where your local free clinic is. People don't know that. Have the billboard for where the free clinic is, you know? And then once you get there, you can talk to a series of doctors and go up the ladder and say, hey, this is my problem.
But that's the problem that you just described, though, right? You described that you yourself didn't know about these series of services until you got to that free clinic on the other side of town, right? In that cheap neighborhood. So wouldn't you want to avoid that? Like, you want everyone to know that this is available. This is a service the government's providing. So that would have to involve advertising.
There's two prongs to this. Number one, yes, everyone needs to know where this is, but it is kind of a need to know basis. Food stamps are not always a very niche need to know thing. Everyone needs to know how to get food stamps. All right. But the ability to go through a series of 10 psychiatrists and social workers and get yourself a ticket to a good death is not something that I would say A, needs to be advertised large scale, B, would be safe for the nurses and doctors working at that place, because that's just like advertising where your local Planned Parenthood is. That's asking for people to show up with guns.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you that one. Spirit Toby, and then Sky.
Yeah, I think a billboard raises an interesting perspective to it, because you're putting something up that literally anybody and everybody sees when they're going by. So it's openly public, right? So you have to take kids into account that are seeing it, and you have to take impulsive suicide people into account that are seeing it. And so it has to be handled delicately. So I've seen stuff like promoting suicide prevention, call the 1-800 line if you need help type of thing. And a side note on that is the billboard company shouldn't be allowed to make profit from it either, or minimal profit or something. And then once they get into like a helpline or something, then it can be determined whether to offer something more, different education things that are happening as like a side tangent to, not just because it's delicate and sensitive, but also because a lot of people seeking help would fall into that impulsive suicide category that just wouldn't even need to be offered that type of thing. I think that might be a decent way to go about doing it as some first thoughts.
I don't understand why the billboard company.
Brochures.
Go ahead. It was Satoshi first.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it could be just brochures that, like, you know, when you go to the grocery store and you see like the stuff pinned up on a cork board, or you like go to any community center, right? Stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I have
this just seems like a weird.
Yeah. Okay. You say it vanilla. You say it for me.
Yeah, like this just seems like weird. Like anyone who goes to this facility and gets released is going to know where the facility is. If the doctors and nurses who refer people there, they're going to know where this. Like to make this qualm about like, oh, we can't make it public. Like it doesn't really make any sense. Like tell people where it is. That's where it's going. Like any other type of treatment facility or prison, are people going to like bomb prisons because their loved ones are in prison for life? Like, I don't get it.
No, I'm just saying it needs to be handled a little bit delicately because everybody's going to be seeing it, and there's other things that need to be seen. It's not like advertising hospital.
What do you mean by that?
What's the potential?
What do you mean
risk? What's the
everybody
potential
doesn't
harm
need to see it?
in this case, if we can filter for it successfully?
Just because you have access to a service doesn't necessarily mean that that service is for you. Right.
Right. So it's just ineffective advertising is the.
But I mean, like you can say the same about gynecology.
Well, on a cold side, you could say that if you, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
I just wanted to do something I think you'll kind of agree is important on the subject of suicide, in case we are talking about it, and in case it is something. As somebody that has used the service, I'm going to give you two numbers. It's 800-273-8255. That is the national, for the United States, kind of suicide crisis hotline. And I'm going to give you a second number just because this is a group that I've represented. I have used this service before. This is the National Veterans Crisis Hotline. Is 1-800-273-8255, and then you'll press 1 for that one. In case. Big subject, but talk about it.
Just saying more effectively, billboards could say, hey, there's government services that could probably help you in your situation. And then it can name a lot of like general things for people. I mean, something like food stamps, everybody pretty much knows.
But it's called, but the example he just gave, it's a suicide hotline. Like it's not the, hey, in case you have a, and then just list off 5. No, this is the suicide hotline. So like, I don't see what, like, you call it what I just don't get this. Like, it doesn't make sense.
I'm confused by the question. Can you help me out?
Yeah.
So it's about billboards. It's about like creating billboards and having that on having these services listed there, and whether that's something that we should do as a society.
Oh, no, services, yes, plural. Yeah, lots of services listed.
Oh, but no, why? I don't see what. This seems weird, though, right? Your strategy there. One, you said something previously. I don't understand why the billboard company can't make money off of it, right? Like they're like you're using the billboard space. I don't know why they can't make money off of that. That seems like a weird thing. But beyond that, or like charge a regular price. But beyond that, like, it's like. We'll advertise this, but we'll try to hide it among a list of others. Like, but why?
Okay, now that you've clarified that there's services going to be listed, I thought that you had said, should we have billboards offering assisted suicide to people?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, if the government is providing it, then and the point is we want people to know that we have services available, which is what Johnny was discussing previously. Then shouldn't we have a billboard?
Ah, damn. Okay, so the first point I'll shift on, the billboard company should be able to charge their regular prices. That seems fine. I just wanted to make sure that they weren't going to be making more money on it and turn it into that.
I mean, they do that with every other contract, government contract.
Right. Yeah. So, but then it becomes a question of like Overton window type of thing, maybe, or are we ready for a billboard for something like that to go up? Because it kind of falls a little bit into the category of should we be advertising alcohol on billboards or other things as well too that are a little, they're a little bit there. But from the principal standpoint of yes, this is something that could benefit some people. We need to get that message out. People could see it. You know, Johnny's cousin's uncle might be able to benefit from that. Then yeah, I could definitely see a billboard saying, "We now offer assisted suicide. Please check this out." You know, if it's very, very helpful.
I mean, though, like, isn't there like some degree of like responsibility there to sort of like just mentions in like papers or in news media and stuff like actually brings up the suicide is not doing this on some level socially irresponsible to like put this out there.
I guess I look at this as kind of like a different way, and maybe Johnny would back me up on this one. It seems like the people that do need what's the proper phrase that you keep using again? A good death?
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay.
Yes.
That do need a good death. It seems like as of right now, we're completely lacking in this at all, right? Just from a legal standpoint. Could we get to there? And I would believe that it would be better if we did. I would reckon that I don't think this is something that we would need to advertise for, because this is going to be something the death industry as a whole, to include like hospitals and such, would be aware of, a service that they would be aware of, and how we provide that is definitely going to be different in the capitalized nation and capitalized services that we have as of right now, or capitalistic services as we have now. I don't think this is something that a billboard would be necessary, because it seems like if you're in that area as of right now, it would be something that you would be aware of.
It's definitely
it's
definitely a case of nuance, and a case of one of those things where your logic for one thing and your logic for one type of advertising, or even for advertising one type of service, cannot be exactly codified onto another type of advertising for another type of service, or even the same type of advertising. Any advertising is influential. We are smart enough in sociology and psychology to know this already, but to advertise specifically something that is already going to be a huge medical process, it would almost be like, hey, do you need to get a new robot arm because that technology is available now and you're an amputee? Call this hotline. It's like, I'm pretty sure amputees generally know about that technology and they're up to date on it if that's something that's available to them. It's like, this is a niche medical thing. This is a terminal illness community issue. And the advertising that service for the terminally ill community to the general population would only serve to be inflammatory.
So hold on, now I'm confused. Okay, and just want to get in line. This Guy, Redolent Thought, and then a new person, Donk. I want to make sure you guys are going to have a chance too. But Johnny, I thought you were for a generalized allowance of suicide, right?
Advertising.
Yeah.
Getting the word out there about government services.
Oh no, I'm for advertising the services that are available through not billboard. I never actually said that billboards were universal.
I'm not talking about the billboard. You're saying you're saying that previously that you would offer assisted suicide to the general population without having terminal illness, right? Just anyone?
No, I didn't. I don't believe that I did. I said a bit of a long sentence way earlier about the extenuating circumstances around depression, and how there would be many more extenuating circumstances besides depression that would lead to an assisted suicide.
Okay. Okay. So what you're saying though is that you vastly expand the list of things that would qualify you for assisted suicide.
Oh, yes. And check off multiple ones in the case of every person who is approved for it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's then in that case, I think that's effective with the general public, because it would be pretty much everyone, because almost everyone has something with them that they're dealing with.
Or I would say it wouldn't be everyone; it could be anyone.
It could be anyone.
I think
anyone.
that would be a big distinction to make. I think Vanilla's right about that one.
Yeah.
So you have to advertise it to everyone, because anyone could be this person.
Yeah, that one.
Who would need. Yeah. So like to say like terminally ill, even with that, I could make the argument of why it would need to be advertised. But if you're expanding your list, then yes, a commercial, a billboard, because that person who has these issues and doesn't know that this is a solution, and this is now a government service, just like all the other list of government services. If this has gotten to the point where it is a government service and we're implemented this into our society, then all these like negative connotations and like harm and outrage, it's already made its way into our government society. So I think that is 90% of that outrage and harm would be handled by it making it into our society. So advertising it, I don't see that being too big of a deal.
Are we having
good point? I'm just going to drop out as well too. I want to thank everybody. It was good chatting, and thank you so much.
Let's go to Guy, and then Relevant Thought, and then Donk.
Yeah, I feel like the concern of if we put billboards up, people are going to suddenly discover suicide is a thing and start considering it isn't really a rational fear. I think that because there is going to have to be like mental health checks, you're going to have to go through a series of counseling in order to go through this. It's not like, call a phone number, we're going to mail you a pill. I feel like it's an on-ramp. It opens up conversations. People are already considering this on their own, and having a sign up that says, hey, there is a system in place where you can come, you can talk to a doctor. This can be painless. We're going to put you through some counseling. Make sure you consider the impact on your family. I feel like all of these things are a good thing. I feel like having billboards in place to say, hey, did you know that there is a medically approved way that we can go through this? There is a process. You're not alone. You don't have to make these decisions on your own. So I have no issue putting a billboard up on every street saying, hey, if you are in this situation, if you're considering this, take advantage of this service, because you might not qualify. 100% of the people that call this service are not going to get it. I mean, maybe 10% of people that try to take advantage of the service are actually going to go through with, the end of their life. But for the other 90% of people, they're going to get the mental health services that they need and hopefully find a way to not do this.
Relevant Thought, then Doc.
Yeah, the problems with some of these things, you just plug them into like today, right? What you would have with a government-backed billboard system for kill yourself facilities would be states' rights would be a huge problem, right? So picture today's Florida or today's Texas, where they would be pushing billboards with dark-skinned black people and trans women in their like early 20s on the billboards. Kill yourself. And you'd be like, oh, that's horrible. But if you have like repetition, people can complain. But if you have someone like Ron DeSantis in charge, like he would just keep rolling with it. Like you guys are thinking like the government is going to explain to people about these facilities. You have Texas who just had their primaries. They made massive sweeping changes to their mail-in voting ballots. And in some counties, over 50% of the ballots were thrown out because they did not explain voting to the people in their state. The government intentionally knew that they were like, by not telling people things, these things would be thrown out and the people in power would be able to like stay in power. These are problems that you have to think about when we throw something new in here, like with like government state like facilities with billboards, with advertising. Like each state would give different. Yeah, Ray. Yeah, Florida's racist. How original. No, it's being run by a fascist who's copy-pasting the fucking fascist regimes of Hungary. Cool stuff, bro. Good stuff, chat guy. Like, it's literally like like Ron DeSantis, like those kind of states are literally using fascist techniques. So if you have states' rights blocking and they can do whatever they want with their billboards, that's a huge problem.
I
agree. I think I heard all that point, and I think I agree, right? So if we're going to say that we can get people the right to off themselves if they meet some list of criteria, that's one thing, right? But for the government to be advertising it, what else could the government be advertising, right? Like, where are we going to draw the line on government advertising? I'm really just going to be saying what the last guy just said. I don't think that the government has any real stake in advertising, right? I mean, it's a First Amendment, right? So an advertiser can advertise anything they want on the billboard, right? So, right? No, I mean, someone can purchase a billboard and can put anything they want on it, right? So they can advertise suicide, they can advertise that, they can do that. But to have the government be getting involved in advertising suicide, I don't know, it's a slippery slope. I don't like it. If an individual wants to advertise, I think an individual can advertise, but I think a government, as far as government advertising, I think it should be very specific, right? So like if a government wants to advertise a specific government program, like Medicare or Medicaid or just any particular government program, go for it. And if that's if suicide, if physician-assisted suicide is included in those programs, I suppose you could put an addendum on there, but it just gets a little slippery, I think.
Let's go to thank you for that, Donk. Let's go to Johnny and then Dustin.
Okay, I'm gonna shout out Kobe Bobby in chat. Hey Kobe, and I'm also gonna just completely reframe this. This is not the assisted suicide within the scope of the services that are offered through things like Medicaid and just general healthcare facilities. That is a service. And so, Prime, when I say I want pharmaceutical companies to be out of the game of making profits, this is part of it. We should not allow for the advertising of antidepressants. We should not allow for the advertising of certain, make your stool softer pills. I believe in the medical sense that letting people know that services and consultations are offered is one thing. However, the ability of people to choose their own services once they get into that consultation is skewed the second that you advertise any sort of product or medication associated with it. Mm-hmm. So in the case of the solution of a certain drug, in the case of a solution of which this is an injection, in the case of the solution of chemotherapy, people are going to, because of this advertising, come in and say, I want this thing. I saw that this thing is effective for what I have and I want it. This is already happening. This is already an issue that our medical system is dealing with. And people are getting on the wrong types of medications for years at a time because of it. And so if I'm going to make my, shit all prim and proper and make it all, line up, I'm going to say that don't let pharmaceutical companies make money on their stuff, make it all state funded so that everybody can get their pharmaceuticals, and also don't let them advertise certain pharmaceuticals to people so that they want to buy them more. Like, I think that logically lines up.
So, okay, but hold on. You wouldn't be advertising the chemical itself, right? You'd be advertising the service. The chemical is effectively a controlled substance, right?
Okay, think of it this way. When you go to a consultation for a doctor, mm-hmm. they are going to, in their best ability, tell you what is best for you. And part of this issue that I'm talking about is that people come into doctors' offices with their solution already in mind because of advertising.
I know that. I know exactly the problem you're talking about. Okay. That's where the pharmaceutical companies have shortcutted the doctor, right? And they have all these, slick ads, right? With, people apparently living life and having fun, right? Because they're taking this pill, right? And then there's a whole list of side effects and shit, right? But which you say very quickly. And then you have this issue, or you think you have this issue, or you do have this issue, and you see this, and like, I want this pill because this is the thing that's gonna be right for me. I've seen these ads and it looks pretty good. So you go to your doctor and the doctor's like, I guess, sure, whatever. And it puts pressure on them to give these things that may not be right for them. I hear you. I know that issue. But but if you're offering, I don't know, you wouldn't offer the drug, so you'd be talking about the service. It's a controlled substance. You're saying, hey, just like we provide services to keep people alive, right? Like the National Suicide Hotline, and be another service to help people deal with their issues. So, like, along with mental health treatments, we provide end-of-life treatments, and that includes this. So I just don't. I don't know, I guess I'm trying to understand, like, what's the dividing line here, and I'm not fully getting it. But
the dividing line is tact and end of life services. That phraseology that you just used, that tact is a huge factor in how this will eventually go if this sort of thing is actually put into place. Because to be inflammatory with this sort of stuff, with something medical, with something that can help people and get people pissed off, it's like if you advertise abortion on a billboard, people are going to go up there and they're going to harass everybody. Like, the tact involved in this is part of, I guess, the social puzzle of how to make this effective, but also not piss the crazy people off, because that's kind of a problem right now.
Yeah, but even when we talk about this, Johnny, you just said I wouldn't be in favor of advertising the product. I'd be in favor of advertising the service. Well, this is the service. Like, they're not advertising the chemical that does that kills the person. We're advertising the service. So
yeah. Would advertise it as end of life services. I would not advertise. I would not talk to people about it as, we have a solution for you, and it's this particular thing with this particular chemical associated. I would say this is a myriad, this is a menu, this is a whole host of things that your doctor might say are available for you. And somewhere in the list, I would say end of life services with a little bullet that says either end of life planning or end of life injection services. And like,
well, but this wouldn't fall under end of life. I don't think the general person. Well, I get that. But what I'm saying is, I don't think the general person would consider this an end of life service because they're not at the end of their life. Like, a general person, when you say end of life services, to me, and I think most people say, it's someone who's going to die in the near future. And I think assisted suicide wouldn't fall in that category. Maybe medically,
amount of the people who want assisted suicide, dear, is the community of people with very.
We're not talking about them.
Permanent long. You're right. We've talked about several different things, and so I'm having a little bit of trouble. What you think, Kobe? What you think, Kobe?
What I think is that when we're talking about making the government offering a service, we have to talk about like every possible group that could be using this. And I think that like most people, even if they don't think we should have like an official way of doing this, most people would agree that if like you have like super cancer, that like, yeah, we should probably be able to like put you out of your suffering. One of the problems is, and this is a very difficult thing to broach without like kind of like being very like dismissive of some people's like experiences. So I'm not trying to be mean. There's just no way to like express what I'm trying to express. There's a difference between being in a situation and thinking to yourself, I don't really want to live anymore. I don't really want to have to exist in this situation anymore. And being in a situation in which the only inevitability is you're going to die. So like my example of like, I have brain cancer that is going to, eat away at my ability for my body's nerves. That is something that's a material thing. When it comes to like, I'm depressed and I don't want to live anymore, how do we respond to this? And I think that there are examples, I can't think of her name, but there's an example of a girl, I think like a Danish girl or a Swedish girl or something, some Norwegian country, who was like 18. She was depressed and the government let her, I don't know how you would phrase it, let her kill herself, killed her, however you would do it. They went through with it. And I think that this is like the really sticky point. I think this is the problem that I come to when we begin to like normalize this, right? There are a lot of like procedures that doctors do that they don't necessarily talk about all the time because like they're really fucked up, right? Like for example, a good example of this is like a lap band surgery. A doctor will tell you that like you should spend as much possible time trying to lose weight naturally before getting that, because it's a massive lifestyle change. It can fuck up and kill you. It's just it's adding like so many risks to your life that just losing weight naturally doesn't have. That if that's possible, every action should be taken to do that. And I know that like in some places they like advertise lap band surgery, but I think we would all agree that that's like absolutely something that should not be normal. Like not like normalized is a weird word, but like it should not be seen as like if you get fat, just get a lap band surgery. Like, no, like it's not going to fix the problem.
it's much more complicated than that. And that's why I think that like I do agree that like end of life services, like you put it, there has to be a tool on the table. But I think there's a distinction between end of life services, which is things we do when you are 100% going to die, when the ship is sinking and we're trying to save, trying to like deal with that, versus I guess honestly it comes to like a patient autonomy. Should a person have the right to kill themselves? And I mean like it's very complicated. If you were to ask me 5 years ago, if you asked me like when I first started talking to people, I would have said yes, that ultimately the goal of society is to maximize freedom for everybody. And so they, yes. But the more I think about it, I don't really know if that's true. I don't like the idea of like living in a society where we let people that say maybe have a are predisposed to like be a gambler or to be a drug addict, we just let them wallow in drug addictness because they have like their brain is like a little curve or something like this. I don't like that. I kind of like the idea of us as society having a mutual interest in each other's well-being. And I think that like going this full autonomy route and saying if you want to kill yourself, you're allowed to kill yourself. I think that's kind of in a way that like maybe just I'm emotionally thinking this, but it emotionally feels like a betrayal of that. That I'm not. It's not. I'm not actually. I'm just giving in to what you want. You want to not live anymore because there's these things about society that you don't like. And I'm getting like instead of trying to fix those things, it's like a giving in. But that I don't know. Again, like I was saying, I think that perspective could very much be seen as something that kind of like overrides people's trauma or whatever. And there are a lot of people that will say that like I'm clinically depressed, and I would argue that this is as debilitating as brain cancer that's going to kill me or whatever. And I mean, at the end of the day, there's some psychology word for like your internal experience of your consciousness, and like you can't argue with that. So I do respect that perspective.
Kobe, would you feel better? Because I think this is the example Doobie brought up. Would you feel better if you found out, and I believe it was she was a Norwegian woman, would you feel more at ease if you had known that woman had suffered several rapes, and it seems like over a course of years she was not able to go through that, and that was the source of her life debilitating depression? Would that make you feel better as far as like knowing the root cause of why this depression had advanced so far to the point where it's not just a depression? It's not just like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I do obviously any amount of like context you add to it.
Yeah, sure, right. So I believe if those are the same examples that you have heard, like we would make a distinction in that point, and you would hope that the medical community would make that point. Another thing that I want to try and adjust, because I think this is kind of like the difference. It's a difference, and I think Johnny was correct as far as like the nuance of trying to actually get this achieved, where if you don't know a lot about the subject, it becomes very problematic when you start hearing ideas. Like Johnny's talking about the idea of like pharmaceutical companies getting a hold of this and then pushing it for a profit. What her and I are talking about, or at least only myself, this is more of a civil rights issue in the spectrum of bodily autonomy, as opposed to a service that is offered from the government, right? Like this is an ability that you have in your choice through the law, not this is something that the government will do for you. Now, there's going to be a problem how we handle this as far as like as a capitalist nation, right? Without a single payer healthcare program, there are issues in which she would say when she looks at this nuance, this is going to be a huge problem if we don't address it with legislation. But I think if we're processing this wholly, we have to try and just at least grasp the first step and then get into her level where we're like, okay, we need to address this. Otherwise, like this is going to be bad.
So, Johnny, you wanted to...
Yeah, I'm gonna give my little closing statement real quick because I'm gonna head out. It's been really fun, you guys, and it's so good to see you, Kobe. I think that Kobe made a lot of really great points. I'm glad that he came on, and part of this is I don't want people to be criminalized. One of the very first steps in all of this that we really didn't even touch on was I don't want people to be criminalized for even the attempt. Which is oftentimes what happens. People sit in jail for days or weeks at a time, or even a psych ward without the possibility of getting out of their own volition for days or weeks at a time and have to pay a bunch of money. And that to me is a sort of criminalization. I don't want people to be penalized for doing this sort of thing. However, to Kobe's point, at what point do you help these people? with this thing that, yes, I agree they ought to have the bodily autonomy to do and not be immediately thrown into jail. This is such a huge topic, and I appreciate that Prime gives these sorts of things like the span of hours that they really need and the amount of perspectives that we really need to like get into some of these nitty-gritty things. If you've never seen me before, hey, my name's Johnny. I'm an educational variety streamer here on Twitch, and we talk about everything from philosophy to art to science. And I hope that you'll catch me weekdays during the day, American time. And also, I'm having a lolcow debate on Wednesday. Is it okay to watch lolcows?
Oh,
answer is fucking yes. There's no debate.
I actually know what that is.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Everyone, check out Johnny Scarlett. The link's in chat. Bye. So, Kobe, I wanted to give you space to answer any of that or respond.
Yeah, there's an interesting point that got brought up on the. I was at work, so I only caught a bit of my lunch break. But the discussion between Fabian and Destiny about like prison, and Fabian kept being the whole like libertarian thing. Was like, why do you want to let the state torture people in prison? And you know, the Chad and Destiny just said, well, that's the fucking point. That's the point of prison in some respect, right? Which is true, right? Which is we're doing a thing that you don't want to do. We're taking away your freedom. We're putting you in a little cage. We're giving you fucking Harry Potter and boring ass books to read. And that's the point. Is you're supposed to not want that to happen to you. And obviously, it's not torture in this same way that's like, you know, waterboard, Abu Ghraib, but it is torture. And I think that like something that Johnny kind of brought up, which is interesting, is it's like if somebody, I agree with her that we should not criminalize these attempts, but there's like a paradox here. If we do not install any kind of force, any kind of penalty, for lack of a better term, of trying to do this, whether that's like institutionalization, you know, whatever, having the state put you on like a therapy, you know, regimen or whatever, if you attempt to end your life, I feel like we kind of default to this sort of like we end up just letting them do it, right? We don't intervene because we don't want to criminalize it, we don't want to, but then so we end up they try to do it and we don't do anything and they do it again. And I think that like my distinction here would be, I do agree that there would be like a level of coercion and like force needed to like stop a person who's trying to, you know, ending their life, and you're deciding to tell them not to do that, right? But that seems to me to be a means to an end, which is we're trying to help them, we're trying to make them not be in the situation they are, versus jail, which is like the cruelty is the point. We're obviously we're not like Azkaban, but like the point is like the punishment, not the cruelty. The punishment is the point. Punishing you. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do agree. I do understand though. That again, there's another paradox, which is sometimes the punishments that come along with attempting to take your life ends up exasperating the problems that led you to want to take your life, which is obviously can be difficult to deal with.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to kind of parse out because there's the big thing that we need to agree on, right? Like, do people have the ability, regardless of situations, to end their life, right? And then we have to agree on, do people with depression, a major level of depression, have the ability to take their life? And then the question that I had kind of brought up at the start of this is like, do prisoners who we agree do not have the same rights as regular citizens, should they be allowed this level of bodily autonomy? Because we already agreed that we're taking it away for a specific reason, but do we like this idea of a sort of retributive, or I think I'd call it retributive justice, where you don't allow somebody to kill themselves because the point of why they're there is because we don't want them in our society?
I mean, but like if you take away if you take away like someone's take away these means that the state has to sort of like stop someone from, you know, attempting suicide, and you're actually doing a whole lot of harm, because like the state becomes unable to intervene when someone actually needs the help. Like, so if someone's going through a mental breakdown at some point, the state needs to be able to at some point say, you know, hey, whoa, we need to put the brakes on this dude. Like, they've gone to, you know, the state needs to be able to intervene in these situations to save lives for the good of the public. Sorry, I would have responded to a lot more of this, but for like, I have this huge brain and like I was on mute the entire time.
No, like,
so like
that would be the other leading point, right? Like, so let's say that this is a program that we do agree that depression can get so horrible that it should be allowed to, you should be allowed to end your life on your terms, right? So then if we have to agree to that in this situation, what we would say is like, okay, we are always the state shall always try and stop people from ending their lives. And if this is the case, if we know these people exist, that we are going to put them on that path to seek treatment as best we can, to affirm their idea of like, this is actually happening to me, I can't do anything about it, and this is, affirm might be the wrong word here, but to qualify that path that physicians assisted suicide for depression is legitimate. Like, you have to have these qualifiers, right? Because we can't just allow people to off themselves, because we do know statistically most people that attempt and don't succeed agree that they shouldn't have attempted.
Dario is a streamer, comes around these parts sometimes. He has a very good argument. Maybe he doesn't believe in this one anymore, but the argument he used, and it probably got brought up earlier, is like we would agree that like if someone's being tortured, that like nothing they say is like believable, right? That's like, it's like, or nothing they agree to, rather, it's like believable, right? They're under distress, right? Well, couldn't you make the same argument that if depression gets bad enough that it's like worthy enough to like end your life, that you're also distressed enough that we cannot, like, maybe we can agree that like a whole panel of doctors might be able, like the evil Obama death panel can make this decision, but like maybe we would agree that like even if you get to that level, we kind of already have to take your autonomy away, because like it would be the equivalent of a tortured person, that we would not, you are so depressed that you're not making these decisions in a sort of, you're not like fully consenting to them. Right?
Which is why they shouldn't be able to enter into contracts, which is why they shouldn't be able to like decide anything that goes on with their children. We should take power of attorney away from them immediately, right? If anyone admits to having suicidal thoughts, then obviously that we should make them a non-person, and it should be a ward of the state. Good idea.
Well, at some level, we do agree with this. And some level, we would agree that if there's a person who's really depressed, that we could, and for example, like spending money in an incredibly erratic way, there are, it's obviously extremely hard to do, but you can become like a guardian of them and like take control.
But and we shouldn't do that. But we shouldn't but we shouldn't actually do that, right? For the most part, that should be a rare part for the most extreme of cases.
I mean, we probably agree. I mean, like when you say for the most part, we probably agree. Like that there are many instances in which this is done to people that it's unjust to be done, or it's done to people in which it's done in a time when it's just, but then later on they no longer need it, but they're not able to get it undone or whatever. Like I agree, but I think that like I don't know, we shouldn't stay on this. We agree.
I think the question that I would have to kind of like respond to is this idea of torture. Like, I think in this case we'd have to agree that torture and suffering are two different things, and this seems to be more of a case of suffering instead of torture. I would say, like, torturing has torture has that outside of.
Isn't it sort of the same thing? Like,
what about torture makes it? Because you're suffering. I'm making you suffer to the point that you're going to want, you're going to do what I say.
But there's a specific outside influence in which it becomes undeniable that just because you are suffering through like a capitalist system does not necessarily mean that you are being tortured by a capitalist system. I feel that there is a distinction.
Oh, but you could say you're being tortured by your mind, couldn't you? Like, you wake up every day and you're just like, you wake up every day and like the first thought that you like feel is just like overwhelming sadness.
Sure.
And this sort of goes on for like years at a time. Or you can't sleep. You can only sleep for like 1 to 2 hours at a time. And this goes on for like years.
And I can only speak to the level of suicidal depression that I had, right? Like, I can't speak in it, and I don't even have the fucking medical background to say how this has happened. But I would say, in my distinction, that for me, it was enough to the point where I believed I was being suffered, but I knew I had enough autonomy and I had enough knowledge that this was not what I wanted. Like, while I think about suicide a lot, I lack the intestinal fortitude to actually go through with it. That kind of deal.
But aren't you like not the type of person that you would be advocating this option for them?
Correct.
Like you're sort of saying like the people in like this cat, in the camp,
but
wake up every day and like
the reason why I know that I'm not is because I did seek out those services, and in this case, I was admitted by the state. The state of Nebraska did admit me for 72 hours or whatever the legal requirement was. And then I received those services through the VA, right? Because my situation was a little bit different. But the point of the state that we are making, or what I would advocate for, is like, yeah, very much so. The point that I was making, that I'm advocating for, is saying that if this person, the state has the responsibility to admit this person and then put them through the qualifications to see if we agree, again, that depression can get bad enough to where you should be able to medically end your life, right? If we agree on that, that the state has the duty and the responsibility to stop you at first and then put you through a treatment so where we can ensure through all the best medical sciences that we have available that this is actually the case, right? Like there's a difference for me, or the distinctions that I make, that there's a difference between torture and suffering. And it seems like suffering seems to be a major cause of depression.
I think
don't like you can disagree with me just because it's my own personal experience. Don't think like you can't. But I'm saying from my example, the way that I process this information, it seems like that would be the best way forward.
I think like
we would all agree. I'm assuming. We all agree probably. Let's say somebody rushed into the hospital with a gunshot wound to the stomach. It's not going to kill them, but they're in an unbelievable amount of pain. And they say, no, I want to die. I want to kill me. Right. I'm going to assume most of us would agree that we should not allow them to do that. And I'm assuming the principle here would be you're shot in the stomach. You're not thinking very clearly. You're probably going to regret, right? And I'm just making the same argument about your brain. That if you've gotten to the point that you are so depressed that it's like your option is that you basically feel like I can't function, or it's end my life, or I cannot function in this mortal coil. At that point, I'm trying to be sympathetic to depressed people. I'd view that as an emergency on a level of a gunshot.
Sure. But you know what I mean? Like if we were to agree that there was nothing that could be done for that gunshot wound, maybe it would be valid for the state.
This is where I think a really good critique would be that like a lot of
you have to make those medical qualifications, do you not?
Well, yeah, I would agree. But things like a lot of if I am imagining this doctor board, they're almost never going to say yes. They're either I think there's two kinds of doctors. There's like
self. Well, I mean, a good doctor board would never say yes. Or
when it comes to this, I feel like there are kind of doctors that would be extremely skeptical of this and probably believe a lot in traditional methods. And then you're going to have like the Kevorkians, which are probably people that are value like patient autonomy. Of like it's my job to ease suffering. The easiest way to ease, I've watched the documentary. Like the argument he makes, I disagree, but it's coherent. A doctor's job is to ease suffering. There are some people the only way to ease suffering is to end their life. You should end their life in the least painful way. I can see it.
You can have the disagreement, but it kind of like naturally follows, right?
I could imagine like.
Leader, you keep getting interrupted. Like it's driving me up the wall. Could you like say what you want to say? I'm sorry.
I guess what I was gonna say is that I disagree in like principle that like you should give the state like this sort of like over life and death like this. I think that the state like I think that like what is it, the death penalty is immoral, and I would say that giving the state supporting the state to sort of make these types of decisions. There's never a correct decision on this. Like the boards that these people pick, they'll be wrong a lot of the time at best, and we won't even know like when they're wrong. And so I just find that I don't know.
I guess the distinction that I do make is I think we would all inevitably agree that the state does have the right to take your life away. In a sense of like, should you commit such a heinous crime, and this is big, please don't connect this to the American prison system, should you not be able to be rehabilitated, that you will be placed in prison for the rest of your life. And the way I process it, that is a death sentence.
Oh well, okay. If you want to say it like that, if you want to say they're the same, I would say they're not though. I would say there's some pretty clear lines there.
I guess I don't make the distinction in the action of the idea of like executing somebody is different than holding somebody in a specific area.
Well, that's a punishment, though.
Correct.
It's a punishment, and in some cases they have to serve that out.
And again, like the American prison system is not something I fucking support, and there are productive ways that you can be a productive member of society even inside a prison system. But I think we agree that the state does have the ability to put you away from the general society for the rest of forever, and I would view that as a death sentence. It feels coherent to me.
That's not true.
I mean, I understand your position, but
does it
like
seem
very
coherent?
different.
Does it seem coherent?
Red, would you agree there's like a line?
Yeah, no.
Over here is like you're in a cage, and I would basically agree. If you're in a cage and we're counting on the clock, I'm basically I'm just giving you food. I agree. But I would say over here on the other line is like Norwegian prison, where you live on like a little island and you have like a little gnome friend and you have like, your own kitchen. Like that is you're basically. I agree. You have to live away from society. But you're also kind of
right. And I think if it was feasible that you could make criminals kind of like live together in those situations, I would prefer that. But it doesn't seem feasible in the idea of like that's a pretty small prison, and it seems like that we do agree that these are members of society. They may be we may even consider them members of a different society at that point, right? And I would still say through the power of the state, it seems like we do have that ability to send you all the way over. And in this case, that if you wanted to, it would make financial sense, and that's not the best way to have this conversation, but it would make financial sense to allow them to end their lives in that case, should we determine that. Therefore, the state has the ability, does and must have the ability to end citizens' lives.
It does and must.
One more thing before I hot up. I'm sorry. One thing that this conversation, very similar to the death penalty conversation, I think these conversations, they sort of attract us to the most extremes. We want to talk about like, serial killers, we want to talk about rapists, child and blah, blah. I think we should also keep in mind that while we have to think about those, a vast majority of people that are going to both be in the prison system in any capacity and are going to be depressed are not going to be suicidally like no other option depressed. It's not going to be their entire life. Most people are going to have like a portion of their. It's like a thing. It's contextual for most people. The same thing with like prison. Like most people who even murderers, it's like gang killings or shit like this. It's not like I'm a fucking serial killer. And like when we're structuring the whole system, we got to remember we got to balance that out.
Yes, very, very fucking much so. And there needs to be lines and very strict borders.
I want to put this so like with sort of like the American sort of like justice system in specifically in relation to the death penalty. They get this wrong all the time. And people will spend 10 years in court arguing about the facts of the case.
Yeah.
There's sort of like the idea that, you know, that there is like a body out there that has like a reasonable sort of like grasp on whether or not like someone should live or die. It's not something, I just don't think that we have like the determination, like, you know, we don't make good choices when these options are like presented in front of us. There's for whatever reason, I think that whatever reason is out there, we fail at like the death penalty. It will certainly, if there's some board out there, it'll be the same sort of deal. There'll be mistakes. People will die unnecessarily, and I think that, you know, it's not something that I don't think it's something that the government should be able to sort of step in on your life with.
Anybody else want to go?
Real quick. Like I don't understand Kobe's jumping in. Like Red, you gave like a very good nuanced response with a solution that with like the safety net of like putting someone through actual like therapy, right?
Yeah.
You were saying like if they go through all of this and they still want to like end themselves, fine. And the response was, here's an analogy. You go into an emergency room, you have a bullet wound, you want to kill yourself. I'm trying to think of like who like how many people do we have going into ERs with bullet wounds that want to kill themselves? Like, oh, just kill me, doctor. Like,
it's the United States.
It's not a thing. It's like a made up scenario to like combat like your nuance. It just eliminated all of the nuance. I just didn't get the point of that.
But the problem is like I address these difficult, complex problems by just saying that the medical field can solve them, and that's not always true, right? Like,
right? It's not just yeah.
So his question, at least the way that I processed it, would be in that same sense of like, hey, this is an overly complex problem. What is your simple, easy solution?
Sure. I mean, I took it as a different way of like eliminating your nuance with, and I'm using this word in a ones and zeros chat, who I've turned off because you're all idiots. Totalitarian thought. Like you literally just like you just yes, no, good, bad, ones and zeros. So like you gave like a nuanced response, and it was, well, if we have a bullet wound, someone getting shot isn't like a process of like depression, like things that lead to depression. It's like survival, right? So like the whole point of like bringing up like a ER bullet wound, you're gonna die maybe, like that's not
maybe not.
Like,
but I
think that was more of an analogy.
It was a real poor analogy.
But I am super interested to hear like the disagreement that Leader and I may have, right? So if if I expand this all the way out to my ultimate end of saying that the state must, and currently do have, but maybe not just must have the ability to separate, if not eventually, what I process. Now, this may be the difference, right? What I process as a death penalty, right? Like, do you disagree with that idea? Or is it that you disagree with the idea that the state has the ability to end their lives?
I disagree with I disagree with the concept that like
okay,
so that like someone being thrown away for the rest of their life is equal to like the death penalty.
Okay,
I think
so-
I think those two are like not the same.
So you don't disagree with the idea that the state should have the power to send these people all the way away, and you would make a distinction in between killing them and sending them all the way away.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, so that's
sure.
exactly it. So you can send people if people's
if they're not real,
lock them away.
Right. So like, I think I used this example way earlier. I think it's kind of like the best because these are some of the worst treated people in our society with some of the worst fucking problems in our society. Is somebody that's pedophilically inclined, that's attracted to little children that cannot control themselves, correct? That cannot control themselves. I would say that that is somebody that should have access to medically induced suicide. I would say that. Would you disagree with that? Or would you say that the state should handle it by putting these people on their own little island, if that was feasible?
I am not qualified to answer that, sir. That is a horrible question. Why would you ask me this? So please stop.
Is this the appeal to the extreme, or just like because
why would you only like open it up to them then? Like, wouldn't it be like everyone's open to it, but we have to figure out if they are actually like quote unquote qualified based on different parameters?
Why
Or
would
are
I
you
only
saying, like start with pedophiles?
I mean, like,
and we'll move on
listen,
to other people we can
and then
I
start with pedophiles, and then we go.
In an ideal society, what I would say is lock them up until they're better. That's what I would say.
Right, and then if we would agree that that's somebody that cannot be rehabilitated through their own admittance, right? Because at that point,
But like that's not something that we deal with in reality.
There are plenty of reasons that we deal with like people that are pedophilically inclined that say they cannot like be reintroduced to society. Like, would you say that?
No, that's not what I said. No, I said.
Oh, okay.
So like we're talking about like rehabilitation.
Very vast extremes.
Yeah,
Very
sure.
vast-
I thought we were
but
talking
his-
about like rehabilitation and like someone who hadn't committed. Now, and I sort of said, look, ideally you'd lock them up until such a time as they were better.
So I guess the question, and again, these are very deep dives, and I don't always agree with this line of questioning, but these are people that we do have to deal with in society, right? So let's say that there is somebody that is pedophilically inclined, has not offended, right? So they have never molested somebody, but they say, I want the state to assist in my suicide, or I want to commit suicide and the state should allow me to do so, right? The state, per the requirements that I had listed earlier, would have to sit there and say like, okay, we're going to get you treatment as best we can. But in the end, if this is not something that we can change, we have the responsibility that
Okay,
we
but
should...
I mean, like, just because the state says no doesn't mean that the person.
Well,
like,
the person
there's nothing that says that the person can't do what the state says no to. And once again, this is hugely to the extreme. I really fucking hate you for bringing this.
I'm
like,
sorry,
this
but
line
this is not out of
You
the realm
dick.
of possible. This is not necessarily out of the realm of the possibilities of what a government may have to face, right? Would you agree or
Yes,
disagree?
yeah. So the thing that you're bringing up is like one of the big problems in like a lot of psychologists, where they say like the thing you're talking about is the person themselves bringing the problem, or is it going to be a forced government or institutional
and this
putting them in the
case-
system and giving like a specific outcome kind
Right.
of thing.
In this case of the question, it would have to be the person who has never offended, never
Right.
assaulted a child, right? Would come to the state and say, I can't live like this anymore, but I can't fix this. And then the state would say, okay, we're going to fix this. And during that process, the state says, fuck, we agree with you. We can't fix this. The state then has the ability to say, yeah, we can kill you. And the person would have to be agreeing, right?
In that particular situation, though, locking them up just seems like the better option for everyone.
And why is that?
Because you're taking away the harm. as opposed to like killing someone.
So I'm taking away the harm, but I'm introducing the suffering of prison. Correct?
No, it doesn't have to be prison. It can be like a psych ward. That's how I would imagine it. Right?
Well, that doesn't necessarily make it any better. Right.
I mean, they're living a life at least. They're not dead. I mean, they might find more joy in that than death. I mean,
and that's the possibility. But again, the person had already approached the state and said, like, I can't live like this. I want the state. Again, ideally, they would probably just kill themselves, but we're trying to live in a just world in which the laws are followed. Right. Again, to state this to chat, just to ensure this is a realistic problem with a hyper different way out there state, right? Like, I don't see a way in which the state says I am allowed to make you suffer because I'm not allowed to kill you. That would be the distinction that I think I'm kind of making.
I don't know the name of the documentary series on Netflix, but during the pandemic when we weren't leaving our house, like in March of 2020, like the wife and I are we're just watching like documentaries like nonstop. There was something, I think it's called something like The Worst Prisons in the World or Toughest Prisons in the World. It's like a series, right?
Yeah.
One of the very first ones, like episode 1, 2, or 3 was a prison in like Eastern Europe, right? And it was the hardest criminals in the country. And they basically just put them in a giant, it looked like a Call of Duty 2 map. Just like a dilapidated, just like empty. You're like, oh, there's like sniper lines all over the place. Like you're watching it going like, this is crazy. But they literally just kind of put them in this giant area and they could go about their day and they kind of built their own lives within what that was. And as you're watching that entire episode, you have to keep remembering, like, these guys are dangerous killer criminals, like the worst people in the country. But they've developed these systems where they're actually like caring for each other, and they're it's not like the prisons in America where you're just like, hold my pocket, like that kind of shit, right? It's just like they were actually like, hey, I used to cook back in the day, so I'll cook the food for everybody. Oh, great. And it was just a rebuilt society in this thing, and there's actual like rehabilitation happening.
Yeah, of course.
Instead of like punishment being the first, like in America, I think I can't remember who said it. Maybe it was Kobe. Somebody said like it should be punishment. That should be, but like every study says like the fear of going to prison for punishment doesn't actually deter crime, right?
Yeah.
So like we need to like reevaluate everything so we can just rehabilitation should be the first thing, and however long that takes for the person, but we need to put them in a better living circumstance so that can actually happen, and it's not about like I better not fuck up or look at the wrong person the wrong way or I'm gonna get fucking like murdered today.
That's not true at all. I mean, we live in mostly functional societies where people just don't go around and shoot other people on the street or.
But that's just the point.
All the various I mean, like people. You say that people aren't afraid of breaking the law. That is just
it's not a
true statement.
Enough.
No, the punishment is not a deterrent, is what we mean. The fear of the punishment, right? So, like, if
I would need to see some studies on that.
Oh, okay. Well, you would look at like murder studies. Yeah, you would look at like, and maybe this is a specific U.S. problem, but the example that he just gave is pretty reinforcing to the idea of rehabilitation, right? Like, we took all these insanely violent people. I think we'd all agree that murders are incredibly violent, right? That just because you murder doesn't necessarily, there can be legitimate causes for murder, but in this case we'd probably have to agree that these were illegitimate causes for murder. And we took these insanely violent people and we put them off in their own society, and they kind of melded together and created what we would probably from the outside looking in say, oh, this is fucking way better than we thought it was going to be, right? So like his statement is far more about rehabilitation. The problem that I have is somebody that is pedophilically, the example that I give is somebody that's pedophilically inclined, does not want to live in a society like that because they're either feared of that or they don't want to be around other pedophiles, right? They don't want to like, they don't like the idea of like, this is my sexual outlet, and if I'm around other people, they're going to talk me into using this as a sexual outlet, and it makes me vastly uncomfortable. Therefore, I want the state to execute me. Did I say that?
Right.
Does that make sense?
I think it's it for me, guys. You guys have a wonderful rest of your stream. Thanks, Prime, for having me on.
How's it going?
Yeah, you have a good one, Reddit man.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
The other thing would just be like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, keep going, Reddit.
No, I was gonna say like, if anybody's actually like read the Stanford prison experiment?
Oh,
Anybody?
wasn't
that
that
the
the
control one?
It's okay. So everybody, the first line in Wikipedia is that it was disproved, but the whole point of it was he didn't set up enough parameters in 1971. We look back at it 20, 30 years later and say that the morality of the setup of the thing, we now like it's like that quote unquote has been disproved. It's been disproven because, but like there's entire studies now based off of it, even though that were unethical beginnings for it. Right?
Was this the one where they?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't that. It was the one the students became prisoners or prison.
Okay, yeah, that was the one. So,
okay.
So the whole point, but the point was like it only lasted 6 days, right? And like even though it started unethically, the prisoners, you had like the prisoners and the guards, right? And the guards were told like you can't physically assault, like it's an experiment. You can't beat the shit out of the prisoners, right? So they had to figure out like on their own. The guards found out ways to control people and punish them with words and rough language and like controlling them on bathroom breaks where they put the thing over their head so they couldn't see, like to keep them in the idea of being a prison. They put like to go to the bathroom, they put like something over your head and led you up the stairs out the dormitory on Stanford to the bathroom somewhere in another building. But like within 6 days, you already had on day 2 or 3, one of the prisoners had a psychological breakdown.
Yeah.
And had to be excused. Like people assume that like, oh, I'm mentally strong, I can handle whatever. But like when you are put in a system and you have everything working against you, there are like your mental faculties can break quicker than you think. And people who think that they're the strongest, sometimes that's their problem. Like those people will crash. The guy who broke was like a sturdy, strong. I think he was like 6'3", 6'4". He was like a strapping dude. But just like the verbal abuse, the guy was like, I have to leave.
Yeah.
You know. So like that was in 6 days. They halted it because like
it started to progress really like.
It got really bad,
right?
yeah. And then he brought in his like future wife, who was also a psychologist, and she's like, "I can't believe you guys are fucking doing this. This is like the most disgusting thing in the world." So he ended it on day 6, but it was supposed to go 2 weeks.
I don't know.
That's how quick that you can get like depressed. With systems beating you down.
I remember like going through that. There was like a documentary that kind of like went through that, and was pretty much like demolished that up and down. So it's like hard for me. I don't remember. It was a little while ago since I saw it, so it's hard for me to take that like thing seriously like at all anymore. But yeah, like that thing was really well like taken apart. Like the whole mythos around it was taken apart. But okay. Anyway, I think we've done it. We've crushed it. Hooray, everyone. Thanks so much. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll have more content for you as I always do. Hit that follow button if you haven't done so yet. Hit that follow button. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. !, social and chat. For our social media, follow us on Twitter for our tweets. Our Discord for when we Discord stuff. And then YouTube is where you find the VODs. Like, comment, subscribe. You can start becoming a YouTube member by hitting that join button, supporting us that way as well.